This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily on a frigid Thursday afternoon here in Peg City as the Jets come back from their road trip 1-3 after a tough loss to the New York Islanders last night. We're going to be all over it. We'll hear from a little post-game from Rick Bowness and Adam Lowry. And we've got a great group of guests today. Of course, trade deadline coming up next week on Friday. Lots going on around the league. Couple deals made yesterday. We'll find out more about that, as well as what the pulse of the league is with Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period. Brandon Rewucki of Skates and Plates will jump on to talk Jets. And a little later on, really interesting conversation coming up with Travis Yost, TSN hockey columnist, on the disparity between the East and the West, the brilliance of Connor Hellebuck, and Travis's thoughts on where the Winnipeg Jets are right now with just 8 days to go before the deadline. Great to have you all with us. Huge shout out to the sponsors that make the show happen each and every day, starting with our friends at Princess Auto and Coolbet Canada, Little Brown Jug, Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace, Culligan Water, Canadian Club, Consolidated Supply, F Apparel, Manitoba Battery, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports. We'll get to a why not question of the day for the gang on down at Not Auto Corp at Waverly and McGillivray. Let's get Michael Remis in here. And Remo, what's up? Stress levels are high amongst the Jets nation after another tough regulation loss last night on Long Island.
Yeah, great to be here. Nice to be warm. It is cold. It is cold out there.
It's
got to
so bad outside.
plug the car in. It's so cold. My son is asking Alexa what to confirm the wind chill here. I don't know. I'm about the Jets. I think it's disappointing that they lost. I don't think the process was horrible. I think the results not ideal. Going 1-3 on a road trip, not ideal. Scoring 4 goals in your 3 losses, not ideal. But I think it's pretty clear after this game what their issues have been lately, and it's going to be up to Kevin Cheveldayoff to address those issues heading into the trade deadline. And this is if the Jets were a reality TV show, which I think of them as one, this is a pretty key point in the season, the NHL season and the TV series season, where you're going to decide how it's going to go for the rest of it when we see what they do at the deadline. So pretty clear, I don't know if it's a mid-season finale here as we get to the deadline, but I think it's going to be a pretty defining moment coming up. But I saw a lot of people on Kenny and Randy in the postgame. Sorry to keep going here, Huss. Really down on the Jets, but I think, look, they're second in the division. They're firmly in a playoff spot. They've played pretty well, and there's an opportunity here with the poor Western Conference that they can take advantage of. You have the best goalie in the league. You just haven't. They've been they're 32-2 when scoring 3 goals, and we're gonna get more into this, but got to figure out a way to get more goals, and maybe some deadline acquisitions will help it. So I'm not on the trade everyone. This team is going nowhere train. I'm actually more optimistic after that one. I don't know about you.
Well, my nerves are frayed, and I think a lot of people are in that same boat. Listen, the Jets have earned themselves a pretty nice spot in the standings. They've won games that they've had to win. They've taken advantage of some of the lesser lights in the Western Conference, and that's helped prop up the record. But this last month has been really concerning. And listen, I know it's an 82-game season. I mean, there are ups and downs. There's peaks and valleys. But it doesn't seem like this team has a lot of answers right now for... listen, the New York Ranger game was wild. The Rangers were all over them, and Connor Hellebuck stood up and stole 2 points. But that's all that this team has to show for this road trip. And The third period of the game last night, I mean, we can talk about the 2 goals that went in. The back pass by Mason Appleton creating that 2-on-1. Nikolai Ehlers skating back, getting there, and it going right between his legs going in. I mean, that was unfortunate. But again, Rick Bowness will tell you, self-inflicted, puck management. And, their rookie on the Islanders that scored what was his 4th goal of his career, with pretty much a bunch of guys watching him, roofing it past Connor Hellebuck, was concerning. Top teams don't allow those sort of chances, and, the Winnipeg Jets have unfortunately done that more often than not lately. But the inability to really create, legit scoring chances when they were down in the third period was tough. I mean, that last 7 minutes, credit to the New York Islanders for being as relentless as they were on the forecheck. I mean, the Jets, never mind getting into the Islanders zone, the Jets were having a tough time breaking out of their own end for a good portion of that time when, they needed to be putting the foot on the gas and creating some grade A's against Ilya Sorokin. We've talked about this before, and I've been, very confident, hey, this team's a playoff team. Look at where they are right now. We'll see how things finish. And I think still, obviously, the numbers say that they will be. But, man, there's just 6 points between the Calgary Flames and the Jets right now. And, again, only one of these 9 teams is going to miss the playoffs. So the chances are really good. But then I look ahead to what's coming up for the Winnipeg Jets over the course of this next month, or call it 11 games. You've got the Avalanche, who are on a roll right now, coming into town tomorrow night. Then these same New York Islanders, a desperate Islanders team that needs every single point on the table right now if they're going to be a playoff team, coming up on Sunday afternoon. Then the LA Kings, another playoff team in the Western Conference, a strange team though. I was just looking when I was doing the lock shop with Dusty. They've got a +2 goal differential. So, a game that, one of those games that you sort of have to have. And then you get into March. Trade deadline day on the 3rd in Edmonton begins a back-to-back against Connor McDavid and the Oilers. You get a home game against San Jose, one of the few non-playoff teams the Jets are going to see for a while. Massive home game against the Wild. And then a road trip to Florida, to Tampa, to Carolina, and then coming back against the Boston Bruins. There is going to be some heavy lifting, some real big challenges for this team going forward, beginning on Friday night. And there's a lot of things that need to get better and get back to where they were for Rick Bowness's club, both in defensive structure, puck management, but also, Remo, as you kind of laid out, the goal scoring has dried up. And that is not something we've normally associated with the Winnipeg Jets. They've been able to score goals. It's been kind of their own end that's been more of a concern. Well, there's concerns slipping in on both sides of things. And, the bottom 6 has been a black hole when it comes to goal scoring. It puts a lot on the shoulders of those top players that are getting the majority of the ice time, puts a lot of pressure on the power play. And right now, they got to find their way in a number of ways. And I'm not sure that we can put it all on the shoulders of the general manager. Look, would it be a game changer to get a player like Timo Meier? Yeah, absolutely. Is that possible? We'll see. What is the cost? Maybe there's a multiple ads at a lower cost coming in. But I'll tell you what, there's a lot of work to do for everybody involved in the Winnipeg Jet organization. I think this last road trip was a glaring example of everything on the list.
Yeah, 34 goals, Hess, in the last 14 games. That's an average of 2.4. You look on their season, that's well below their season average. You think of the way the Jets have played, 3.1 is their average goals per game, and we know when they score 3, which doesn't seem like a pretty high number, Huss. At 3 goals that they do win. You mentioned scoring, and I think we should play these clips from Adam Lowry, but I think the way he's gone, the Jets season has gone. And you look at his numbers, I'll give you his splits. October, he had 6 points in 9 games. November, 6 points in 12 games. December, 9 points in 16 games. So in the first 3 months of the year, he had some pretty solid numbers. He had a
great start. He was on pace to beat his career high for goals, was scoring. And, he's a perfect example of the bottom 6 overall, kind of the leader of that bottom 6. what is it, 31 games now? He hasn't scored a goal?
Yeah, just Mike McIntyre wrote it with the goal scoring droughts from the bottom 6 here. A couple of them at least. Adam Lowry hasn't scored in 31 games. Saku Menelainen in 18. Barron in 16. So back to these Adam Lowry splits that I found so interesting. Shout out to Hockey Reference. You can go and find a player and click on splits and choose the year, and it'll give you some really nice breakdowns. Look at him in January. He has 3 points in 15 games. And then in February, he's got 1 point in 6 games. But more interesting to me, I mean, in the Jets wins, he's got, 19 points in 35 and 5 points in 32. And why am I highlighting Adam Lowry? Yes, because he spoke after the game. But you can see that when he's scoring, the Jets are winning. When the Jets are scoring 3 goals in a game, they're winning. And when they're scoring 3 goals, they're getting contributions from the bottom 6. And they haven't got that from the bottom 6 lately. As you mentioned, they haven't had a goal in February. And then you have Nikolai Ehlers hasn't scored in 10 games. So no, you're not really getting any goals from anyone. And I think, they should go and try to get some help, but they also need these guys to step up and play like they were playing earlier on in the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, and listen, and the one good thing that came out of last night's game was that Nikolai Ehlers got off the schneid, and for everyone that rode with me on that plus 250 goal prop, at least we got something out of last night. But yeah, let's hear from post-game. Before we get to Lowry, let's hear from Bones, because, I kind of talked a little bit about what Rick Bowness had to say after the Jersey game, after New York, and how it sounded a little different. And I think in some ways the team's sort of at a real crossroads, one of the most stressful times of the year for players, certainly for the guys in that room that haven't been able to score in a long time. And we'll just start it off with 6 through 10, Remo. And here is a quick synopsis of Bones' thoughts on last night's loss to the Islanders.
Too many missed scoring opportunities around their net. To start with that. And a couple of mistakes by us with poor puck decisions, and ended up in the back of our net.
Pretty succinct. And man, first period, Reem. I mean, Blake Wheeler getting that one in between Sorokin and the net, but just going along the goal line. Kyle Connor on that first shot, ripping it off the post. I mean, you can't hang it on those guys, but as Rick Bowness said, they did have some looks. But much like teams playing against Winnipeg, going up against all-star goaltending, you got to make the most of those opportunities, and the Jets weren't able to do it. Now, the shots against was far down, about half of what they were against the New York Islanders, which was a positive. And Bones talked a little bit about what he thought about the defensive play of the team overall last night for 60.
Yeah, we were fine. I mean, we didn't give up much, but so that's defensively we were far better tonight. So that didn't hurt us. It was the puck decisions that ended up in the back of our net and the missed opportunities around their net.
Yeah, I mean, Rick Bowness talked about puck decisions, puck management, and I mean, that was a direct result of, basically led to 2 goals against. But it does come back to you can't win in the National Hockey League if you can't score, and the Jets have had a real tough time scoring. Bones lamented the lack of scoring by his hockey club last night after the game.
Well, we need more from the bottom 6, there's no question. So we just keep getting them out there, and eventually they work hard, they generate things. They can't pass up any opportunities to shoot the puck, which I thought we did tonight a few times. But they're working, they're banging around the net. It's just not going in for them right now.
Yeah. Rick, when you see guys going through a dry spell, how do you find that fine line between having the urgency but also not squeezing the stick too tightly?
No, well, they got to play through it. I mean, that's what you do. You're not going to score being tentative. You got to put more pucks in the net. It goes back to trying to get a greasy goal. Just get in there. And I thought in the second period they were in, while banging around the puck, it just wouldn't go in. They had the opportunities. It just didn't go in for them.
All right, there's a little bit more from Bones on last night's game and the lack of scoring. I mean, the one thing that has come around a little bit lately was the power play. And again, Nikolai Ehlers got on the board last night, which was a real positive after a 10-game goalless drought for number 27. Bones talked about what he saw from the Jets power play last night.
I didn't like the last couple. I think we got to listen. We had 2 power plays in the third period. We didn't generate enough shots. We're passing it around now. They're the number one penalty killing team in the league at home, and they've got an outstanding goalie. But that doesn't mean you pass it around and pass it around. You got to get more shots. Right. It's as simple as that.
All right, and as I mentioned, the positive, Nikolai Ehlers scored on the power play and tied that game up in the second period. The negative was, two really subpar power plays with the game on the line trailing in that third period that Bones just mentioned. One more clip from Rick before we hear from Adam Lowry, and Bones was simply asked if he thinks they can turn this around.
Absolutely. I believe in this team. We'll play ourselves through this. We got the most important game of the year coming home on Friday night, and that's the focal point right now.
Right. And 6 of the next 7 will be at home. Yeah. Is that a good thing in your books?
We'll worry about Friday night.
Yeah, can't get too far ahead past Friday, but the Winnipeg Jets with 20 wins on home ice so far this year, hopefully can get back to their winning ways when they come back. All right, let's get to Adam Lowry, because Rick Bowness lamented, a lack of bottom six scoring. And when Adam Lowry was asked about the game and about the result, somewhat looked squarely in the mirror at himself and the other guys outside of the top two lines that just have not been able to score lately.
Probably some of it has to do with secondary scoring. It's been a while since I think me, Bear, Cooley, a few other guys have found the back of the net, and sometimes that's the difference where you can't rely on your big guns to score 3-4 every night. So we got to start carrying the load a little bit and take a little ownership on that. I think we had some chances, but that's the difference. They get a goal from the bottom six, and we don't tonight.
Adam Lowry, mentioning really what was the difference in this game. Islanders got one from their bottom six, and the Jets, which has been far too often the case lately, nothing to show for their third and fourth lines. Here's a little bit more from Adam Lowry on the scoring drought.
It's one of those things, kind of, sometimes you get away from the things that were making you successful earlier on, and they're little adjustments that you might not even notice. Sometimes you got to go back and watch some clips from earlier in the year just to see what you were doing and try and get back to, and just kind of getting on the same page with your line mates. I think for our line tonight, we at least generated some chances. It was a little better than the D zone we played the whole night against the Rangers. So, but yeah, coming down the stretch here, we know the games are going to be tight. The margin for error is so slim, and I don't think we made a whole lot of mistakes tonight, and but neither did they. It's tough to create offense out there. Two great goalies and two teams that are pretty committed to defense. So it's just finding ways to get some of those greasy ones and generate some momentum for your team.
Adam Lowry with a little bit more on the issues that Winnipeg Jets are having scoring goals right now, which is a big part of this slump. And the one thing I'll say, Reem, we often, we've talked about one player. Adam Lowry's been the guy for the last 10 games or so. We've been talking it. It's been a long time. Half the team seems to be running around with a big monkey on their back right now.
We mentioned Ehlers getting it off his back. I think a lot of them, have had trouble scoring. Pierre-Luc Dubois has seen a bit of a drop-off since that first half of the season. So, we can dump on the bottom six. I think the top, and especially the power play. You look at that game against Columbus, certainly a winnable game. You had a number of power plays, five on threes, jinx, and we couldn't score. And then, sorry, I had to throw that jinx in. Especially last night, 2 third-period power plays. Good teams put that away, and the Jets were doing that earlier in the season. They're not doing it now. And I did look up, I saw a tweet online about the Penguins, third line, how poor it's been. And I said to you, jokingly, because the Jets' third line matched this 8 points since January 1. They were slightly better. Since January 1, Lowry's got 4 assists. Menelainen's got 2 assists. Appleton's got 2 assists. Denland, 2 points. Who else am I getting here? Kuhlman's got 2 goals. So not really getting a whole lot. And the most interesting part to me has since January 1, the bottom 6 player who's got the most points just got waived and was on the Moose, Axel Jonsson-Fjällby. And you look at his rate stats per 60 minutes. Since January 1, he's actually been more efficient in scoring goals, recording points than Dubois, Perfetti, and Josh Morrissey in all situations. So when Axel, in limited ice time, 9 minutes per game, he was actually performing pretty well. And I wonder if he gets in now on Friday. And I'm shocked that I'm learning about this for the first time, how good he's been relative. Not how good. I mean, it's one more point than the rest of the line, but he hasn't played a whole lot of minutes. So
well, the bar's been set relatively low.
Pretty
but
low.
I mean, I mentioned this yesterday on the program. I thought that, it might have been a perfect time to get him right back into the lineup, considering the way that he played with the Manitoba Moose. He scored 3 goals in 4 games. I think would have had a real jump getting an opportunity, but obviously that didn't come last night. And anybody that can maybe help a little bit offensively right now in the bottom 6, not necessarily that Axel's the answer to all the problems, but they got to find something. The standings are tight right now. Calgary won against Arizona in a bizarre game. I think the final shots was 51-14 or something like that. At one point, they were out shooting them by 30 and were down 3-1, but the dam of Karl Vejmelka did finally break. But here's just one more from Lowry on watching the standings and what's happening both in the Central Division and in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think we're aware of kind of where we stand, the opportunities we have, how tight it is from kind of 1 through 8, really. It's important you don't get lost on, just focusing on, the results. You kind of, like I was asked earlier with the processes, make sure that, the wins you are getting are, conducive to winning. You can't give up 50 shots like we did against the Rangers and expect to win every night, right? So, I think we know there's an opportunity to win the division and challenge for the conference. It's our goal is to finish as high as you can. You want to get home ice as long as you can in the playoffs. So, it's important we get back, use this homestand coming up, and give ourselves that opportunity to keep climbing in the standings.
All right, so there's a little bit more from Adam Lowry. And, we're going to talk about some of the trade markets, rumors, and whatnot happening around the league with Dave Pagnotta of the 4th period coming up right now, Reem. But I have to admit, I sort of finished up that game, and I was, talking with some buddies that I was watching the game with and going, I mean, if you're Cheveldayoff right now and you're looking at the big picture, we've talked a lot about one big guy like a Timo Meier to come in. I'm not sure that, Cheveldayoff's not thinking about bringing in multiple players, maybe not at the level of a top-line forward, but to supplement this group that has gone just so ice cold. Or would that be an overreaction? Over the course of the season, these things will happen. Is it all happening at a bad time for Winnipeg? And you still do need to focus on what can give your team the best chance to win over the course of the entire playoffs, which would probably be an impact player like the Myers that we've heard so much about that are in high demand amongst many, many teams around the league.
Yeah, I think a lot depends on Cole Perfetti. Ken finished up asking for an update. They really didn't have any. We know that he's on IR with an upper body injury, and if you're missing him, I think you have to replace his scoring, and you probably need one or two other guys. You'd like to get one guy who's top 6 capable, and this is kind of, I'm going to say last dance, but you're winding it down with this core group. Heading into the offseason, Pierre-Luc Dubois is an RFA. We think he's probably, doesn't want to be here long-term. Mark Scheifele is entering a final year, Connor Hellebuck, Blake Wheeler as well. So you got to decide, what are you going to do with this group? Are you going to try to push and go for it this year and maybe try to get some of the assets in the offseason? Or I don't think they're in a playoff spot. I don't think they're pulling the plug. And you look at Money Puck and Dom's projections, you're at 90% playing the play in the playoff, 90% to make the playoff. So I do think you got to make some additions, try to get some scoring help, and you hope that your guys can go back to playing they were in the first half. But I am seeing people online getting some major 2019 vibes here with this second half off. And look, the season's not over. You got a whole month left, some April too. So we'll have to wait and see what happens before we can write the book on the season. But I think some people are heading towards a bit of doom and gloom.
It's funny you mentioned 2019, because I'd be lying if I didn't say I was maybe going to go back and check those, these periods in the second half of the season where the Jets have really struggled. And compare it to what's happening right now. Lots of hockey left. Avalanche in town tomorrow. And we're going to get to the trade deadline and everything happening around the league right now with Dave Pagnotta. But in the chat, let's get to the why not question of the day. Are you looking for one big fish right now, Jets fans? Or do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff should basically double down and acquire multiple players that could play in the middle six and bottom six to help the scoring drought that this team's going through? We'll get to Dave Pagnotta in just a minute. It's freezing outside, no surprise. We'll get a little nicer on the weekend. But folks, if you need a battery for your car, your truck, or even that summer toy you're working on, Manitoba Battery is the most convenient and well-priced option in the city. You can put that order in for the battery at lunchtime today and have it sitting on your doorstep in 2 to 4 hours for less money than you'd spend anywhere else in Winnipeg on the same battery. Manitoba Battery, in a lot of ways, the local option as the Amazon of batteries here in Manitoba. No fighting for a parking spot at Costco, waiting in line at Canadian Tire, or spending more money on a battery at the big box stores. Let Manitoba Battery bring the battery to you while you spend time on more important things. Give them a phone call or order online at manitobabattery.com. It's that simple. Let Manitoba Battery simplify your life. Well, we can look ahead to golf season, being outside, and I know Joe, Spicy, and the gang down at Consolidated Supply are doing exactly that. Already getting ready for golf season with irrigation options, artificial turf, and more for courses, but also for people on their own properties, not to mention the club car dealer in Manitoba. And if you're thinking about a project to beautify the backyard and get more out of it, talk to the gang down at Consolidated Supply about beautiful outdoor kitchen options, as well as spas and hot tubs. Pop down and see them at 1395 Niagara Road East. They are open to the public, and you can also check out their website online at cte.ca. Congratulations to our January winner of the Wallace & Wallace Winnipeg Sports Talk Unsung Hero program. We're still welcoming in nominations for our February Unsung Hero. Tell us about that person in the community making a difference through charity work, volunteering, and more. And the winner of the Unsung Hero will get an autographed jersey from Josh Morrissey, and the Winnipeg Sports Talk listener who nominates the Unsung Hero will have a $500 donation made in their name to the Dream Factory by Wallace & Wallace, and Josh and Margot Morrissey will match that $500 as well. Again, the email address to nominate that community unsung hero, send it in today, is unsunghero@winnipegsportstalk.com. And just before we bring in Dave, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, get on down and shop local at one of 7 Vita Health Fresh Market stores, family owned and operated since 1936. With Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products. Don't forget February's Heart Month. It's crucial to support this vital organ with omega-3 fatty acids. We can't always get enough in our diet, so supplement with RX omega-3 fish oil by Natural Factors, helping support cardiovascular health, cognitive function, eye health, joint pain, and flexibility, and it happens to be on sale today at Vita Health. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. All right, let's take a little trip around the league a week before the trade deadline with one of our go-to guys, Dave Pagnotta of the Fourth Period. Dave, what's going on? How are you? Oh, I think we got you muted there for a second. Reem, is that on our end?
Something on the air. Might be AirPods. Let me try them.
Let me just see. It might be.
I don't think
double check.
Working. Okay,
there we go. There we go. Dave, what's up? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good now that this is working. It snowed a ton over here overnight, so had to deal with that garbage this morning. But it's winter, so what are you gonna do?
No doubt about it. Remo, are you getting that feedback at all?
Oh, no. I know what that is. I'll fix that for you. Sorry
okay, perfect. Dave, hey, just before we talk about everything going on around, and yes, I know, by the way, you mentioned the snow that you're getting. Thoughts and prayers to our pals, Mike McIntyre and Ken Wiebe. I was just texting with the guys. They're, of course, in New York City, coming back to Winnipeg today. They can't go through Toronto. They can't go through Minneapolis. Going through Phoenix. The convenient New York City, Phoenix, Winnipeg run. I think the guys will get back just in time for the game tomorrow. Ken will join us, though. We'll probably have to hook up with him in the morning and do that. But just, hey, before we get to everything happening around the league. You and the fellas were down in Carolina for the Stadium Series on the weekend, weren't you? Man, that looked amazing on TV. I mean, you were there, interested just to hear what it was about. It seemed like it was a very, very cool event for that area, and certainly as far as Stadium Series goes, one of the best we've seen yet.
Yeah, they put on a hell of a show. The production there was great. The optics were fantastic. It came across really well on television. And it was a fun event. The fanfare, they had 2 separate fanfares set up. They had one in downtown Raleigh the day before the game, and then the day of the game, they had it right outside in the parking lot, outside the field. So when everybody was basically tailgating and boozing up pretty early because they opened up the area at about 2:00, the fanfare was fantastic. They had bands playing. They had all kinds of different activations and fun stuff for everybody to do and partake in. And then the game itself was pretty cool, and the atmosphere there was really cool too. So kudos to the league on this one. These are starting to become a little bit more centralized and localized for the local markets. But I've been to a bunch of these Stadium Series games already, and this one was fantastic. The one in last season in Nashville was great as well, but this one just had a different kind of vibe to it, I think, because of the tailgating and the college stadium atmosphere. It was just a really cool one.
Well, and of course, you got to see one of the best teams in the National Hockey League in the Carolina Hurricanes. And listen, the Jets have just come back from the East, 1-3 on the road. We were talking, and we've got a bit with Travis Yost coming up later on just the discrepancy between the East and the West right now. And I'm interested in your thoughts before we talk about some specific teams and spots around the league in the trade market in general right now. I mean, we obviously saw the Islanders make that move early. The Rangers have made that move early. The Leafs have made a move now. Not as much has been happening in the West. What do you make of the difference in the early aggression of GMs in the East compared to their counterparts in the West in a much weaker division, but everything's so close and not one team even close to kind of pulling away from the rest of their competition?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think that some of these teams in the East are trying to do that. They're trying to get some additional assets and weapons and trying to one-up their other counterparts. Like Carolina, we just talked about, like they're in the thick of things for Timo Meier, and we know New Jersey is as well. So, they're battling it out in that regard. What's going to happen with Patrick Kane? Is he going to the Rangers? Are they going to be able to finagle the cap and make this work? Like, these teams are just trying to one-up each other in terms of trying to make some types of additions. Whereas in the West, the sense that I've been getting for the most part is because it's so wide open, like it's almost anybody's guess. If you get hot at a certain point, regardless of what team it is, like you could do some damage and you can go on a bit of a run. So I think it's kind of like it's not so much hesitancy on the teams in the West, because I know Dallas would like to add. Certainly the Kings continue to look for somebody on that back end. Vegas is wide open trying to make some additions because of their cap space. Seattle put Chris Drieger on waivers earlier today. They're looking to free up a little bit of money to potentially make some moves too, and so on, and the Jets and everybody. So it just seems like the teams in the East are just being more aggressive simply because they're trying to get one up on, or trying to one up one another and create a little bit of space between the top tier and the rest of the pack. And it's tough when so many teams are just kind of going back into it and doing the same thing the other teams are doing.
I'll tell you what, I mean, the guy that I envy right now, well, not because of where his team is, they stink in the Sharks, but Mike Grier,
yeah.
I imagine he's just sitting back and letting the offers increase. He does have the number one player on every trade bait board, trade list in Timo Meier. You mentioned Carolina, mentioned New Jersey. Winnipeg has been a team that would love to get Timo Meier, would have the assets to do it. What's the latest on Meier, and how do you think this ends up with the return for Meier in comparison to what we've seen for the likes of Horvat, Tarasenko, and O'Reilly that have already been dealt?
Yeah, the return will be greater. He's controllable. He's a restricted free agent. The qualifying offer of $10 million, it doesn't really scare too many people, quite frankly. Or at least that's the message that's kind of being put across. They haven't gotten to the point yet where San Jose is comfortable with an offer. And I don't know if an official offer has really been presented. It's more of like, we like this guy. We'll consider this player. Would you think of another player like New Jersey? Alex Holtz is there and a first-round pick. Well, what else? Okay, well, San Jose likes Dawson Mercer. Well, hold on a second. Now that changes the dynamic a little bit from New Jersey's side of things. If you want Mercer, well, we're not giving you Mercer and Holtz and a first. Let's try to figure this out. So nothing's been formally presented, but that's going to happen relatively soon. 8 days away from the trade deadline, some teams like New Jersey would like to get him not only acquired, but signed to an extension. And I've got to imagine the Jets would be in the same position. They would like to do something like that. Carolina, they kind of are going with the flow. They're like, we'll worry about the contract later. It doesn't have to be a sticking point. But the contract also affects the price. So it could be tactics on a team's part like Carolina. They're saying, okay, well, we'll just acquire him and we'll take our chances. We don't want to pay a huge premium for a guy because we don't know what his future is going to be like. So all of that's being played out as well. Columbus has been in the mix. St. Louis has been in the mix. Buffalo's been in the mix. Like a lot of teams like this player because of what he brings, but also the fact that he's 26 and he's got RFA status tied to him.
You know, you bring up St. Louis, which is a fascinating team. I mean, they don't project to be a playoff team, and they've already sold some assets, and they might as well. However, they have been mentioned in the Timo Meier sweepstakes in the fact that they now have 3 picks. I mean, how do you see St. Louis navigating the next 8 days? Does Barbashev get dealt? But might they be adding as well?
Yeah, they're going to do both. Barbashev will be traded. When, not if, is kind of what I've been told with respect to Barbashev. The asking price is a second-round pick and a prospect. They could hold out and until the deadline and hope that a team gets desperate enough and gives up a first-round pick. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the price has been set for the last few weeks. It's a second and a prospect, and if you really want them now, make a better offer. So I think that's going to happen closer to the deadline. That's the kind of the gist that I've been getting. Thomas Greiss is out there. There's a few other players that are available as well. But this is a team that doesn't want to rebuild, and they don't necessarily want to retool. They kind of want to just make things work on the fly and get back to contender status next season. So that's why they're in on Meier. That's why they've checked in on Jacob Chikrin. That's why they're looking at those caliber players that can help put them over the edge. Mid-20s, that could fit the core of this team. And that's also why they've been taking calls on both Colton Parayko and Torrey Krug. One guy's a right shot, one guy's a left shot, different type of players. Krug's more offensive. Parayko's more the stay-at-home type. But they're listening. Both of those guys have no trade clauses, but teams are calling. Like Calgary and Ottawa, 2 teams interested in Parayko. We'll see kind of how things kind of go in that regard. He's in year 1 of an 8-year extension. Krug is in year 3, I think, of a 7-year deal. And they're at the same cap hit. So for St. Louis, if they do move either of those guys, they want to bring in a young defenseman as part of a package that can slot in. And they want to create a little bit of cap wiggle room in order to make some adjustments up front. Because they do have a pretty deep back end, especially if they get somebody on that blue line back for either of those 2 guys. So St. Louis is an interesting team. Doug Armstrong, not afraid to make moves, not afraid to make bold moves. And if he can kind of wing it on the fly and just kind of massage his roster for next season and get back into that contender status, that's what the Blues would like to do.
Hey, if you had to bet, I mean, as of right now, when we're having this conversation, they've got 3 first-round picks in a loaded draft coming up this summer. How many picks do they actually go to the podium and make?
I think 1.
Really? You think that 2 of them might be on their way elsewhere?
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen in the next 8 days.
Yeah.
But before the deadline, they're going to if they don't pull that off or those types of moves off, they're going to look to do it in the summer at the draft. But I think they hold on to 1 and use those other 2 to make those immediate additions. Because like I said, they don't want to prolong this. They want to get right back into the hunt for the playoffs next season. And with guys like Kyrou and Thomas and Binnington in goal and a pretty sturdy defensive core, they want to make those adjustments up front. And I think, especially because if they move Barbashev and get a second-round pick, like they may not get a first, but they may be in a position where they get a high second. So if you're losing a high first but still have a high second, it kind of, whatever. It's 10 different picks or 12 picks or whatnot. In the grand scheme of things, not the biggest end of the world, but you have a first-round pick, which is a sexier asset to trade to bring in somebody right away. So I think St. Louis between now and, say, July 1st, maybe July 2nd, they're going to be very active on a number of fronts.
Dave, a lot of talk in the Winnipeg Sports Talk chat, well, every day about what the Jets are doing and what Kevin Cheveldayoff should do. It's interesting. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about, you know, a player like Timo Meier. I mean, a big swing, you know, to come in and, you know, give the team a real chance to, you know, have a big, strong playoff run through the Western Conference. There's been a real power outage in Winnipeg as of late. I mean, they have got absolutely nothing from the bottom six for the majority of the new year. And, you know, when the Jets score 3 goals, they win. I mean, that basically is how things work when you got a goaltender like Connor Hellebuck. And there's also the pressure on the team to put their best foot forward when it comes to potentially extending Hellebuck and how important he is. We're kind of going back and forth between multiple pieces coming in for Winnipeg or a real big swing with those assets you're willing to move on a top player. What are you hearing in addition to the interest in Timo Meier? I mean, what do you make of the Jets situation? Are you hearing anything about other players that they've been linked to or interested in?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, other than Meier, I think I mentioned we talked about 2 guys in St. Louis, Barbashev, pending UFA, Parayko, locked in long-term. I believe they've checked in on both of those guys. It gives Chevy options, to make different adds to the roster. Whether you're bringing in somebody who can fit your middle six, like Barbashev, who's very versatile. He can play any of the 3 forward positions. He's got a low cap hit at $2.25 million, and he's not afraid to get dirty. Like he was when St. Louis won the Stanley Cup. He was one of those grinder, get in the corners, make some noise kind of players. Last year, he put up 60 points. This year, production has tailed off, but I think it's more of a result of the circumstances of how the team is playing overall. But those are a couple players that I believe they've at least, you know, checked in on. I do expect them to make some type of addition in the mid-6. Maybe it's bottom, maybe it's 3rd or 4th, but I think the potential for a guy who can slot in and be, you know, kind of moving up and down the lineup, depending on opponents, depending on matchups, I think that's what they prefer to do. And I mentioned it earlier. When you look at the West and you look at the Central Division, even the Pacific, I guess both of them, there's no clear-cut team that's that much far ahead of anybody else. Everybody's right there in the race, including Colorado now, because of their injuries. And they'll get Landeskog back at some point, but now there's the scare of Makar and everything going on there. So what type of ad can you make that can really put you over the top? And is this the year where almost any team in the West has an opportunity to get to a Stanley Cup final? So if you make an impact addition or 2, is now the time to pounce to get you to the final, and then who the heck knows, you've got 7 games to pull things off against an Eastern Conference opponent. I think that's the mindset for a lot of teams right now in the West, including Winnipeg. I throw Dallas in there as well. Colorado's not sure what they can do because of their injury and cap situation. Vegas is another team because of their cap space. They'd like to make impact additions as much as they can. So I think from the Jets' perspective, they may be looking with contracts coming up for a couple guys that you mentioned earlier, with the uncertainty / quasi-certainty of the future of Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think this is an opportunity that Chevy and his staff are looking at going, you know what? This might be the perfect time to really pounce. So it wouldn't surprise me if they make 1 or 2 impact-type additions. And by impact, again, it could be a Barbashev type, but those types of players mean so much come playoff time. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to pull something like that off because it might be the right moment to do it this season.
One of the really interesting teams as we get closer to the 3rd of March is a team that's going nowhere other than the draft lottery in the Chicago Blackhawks. Yeah. Explain this deal to me yesterday with the Ottawa Senators, maybe from the Senators' perspective as well. And then touch on Kane's situation because he looked like he had checked out a week ago. Now he's on fire. He's playing great. They're winning hockey games, hurting their draft value. What's next for Patrick Kane? But start off with that deal yesterday because I think that was a bit of a head scratcher, getting what was it, a 2nd to 6th, and taking the Zaitsev contract with Ottawa, just getting it off the books.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the Sens wanted to do. And about 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, they made it known that they were going to give a 2nd-round pick to any team that wanted to take Zaitsev off their hands at full pop. It was a 4th-round pick that was added in 2025 or 26, whatever it is. But it cost a little bit extra, but it got him off the books. So moving Mott to New York a few days prior and moving Zaitsev yesterday to Chicago, they freed up about $6 million overall in dollars and cap space to give him a little bit more flexibility here. And that was the goal. They talked to the Ducks about eating salary. They talked to a few other teams about making this happen. Chicago's going to make more trades beyond Patrick Kane. So they need some roster players eventually to be on that team. So to get a second-round pick for a team that's rebuilding, and it'll probably be a middle-of-the-pack second, I think this is a move that I like it from both sides, quite frankly. Chicago's got money. They got the ability to pay this off pretty handsomely and easily, and they have a ton of cap space that they're going to work with, especially after they make a few more moves here. So, you know, I get it from Ottawa's side of things. They're also looking to free up the roster space to add someone. Like I mentioned Parayko. They've checked in on him. They checked in on Mackenzie Weegar in Calgary. I'm not sure exactly what the Flames are going to do at this point. Depends on the time of day. You hear one thing, you hear another. But they checked in on Parayko. Can they make a move to get either him or Chychrun, and then that allows them to move out Weegar or something? Like, there's so many different scenarios that kind of play out. But Ottawa checked in on that too. So I don't think the Sens are done. I know Chicago is not done with what's going on with Patrick Kane, and I'll get to him in a second. But after that Zaitsev deal, there was a lot of rumblings that Jake McCabe was on the way out. And I've been told, similar to Barbashev, it's a when, not if scenario for Jake McCabe, who has got another year left on his contract, a $4 million cap hit. Chicago's willing to retain. There was a lot of talk that something was very close there. Then we find out Zaitsev has some immigration paper issues. Got to wonder if that's playing a factor. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it might play a bit of a factor because Chicago played it yesterday, and they got another game coming up. So we'll keep tabs on that. Sam Lafferty's another guy that is, it sounds like, close to being moved. They have Domi. They have Athanasiou. They have Connor Murphy, almost anybody on this team. So they're very active. And to bring in Zaitsev, you need bodies. You need warm bodies and NHL experience. I understand that addition, but they're definitely going to make more. And then Patty Kane, it looks like Rangers. It looks like they're going to try to figure this out.
How can they pull this off?
So looking at the numbers, you need a third team in this. So basically, you've got to take 75% of Kane's current contract. That's got to be retained by two teams, whether it's 50 Chicago, 25 another team, whatever the heck the math is, 30, 45, I don't care. It's got to be 75. So that means 25% of that deal, $2.625 million cap hit, is what the Rangers will be responsible for. They've got closer to the deadline, so sometime next week they'll be around $900,000 in cap space. They'll move out Kravtsov. That puts them around 1.8. They're still going to have to free up a little bit of space, so there's going to have to be something else that happens. But there are teams that are willing to take that on as a 25%, 30% cushion, because if you look at his numbers and the money, his $4 million bonus was paid out on July 13th. He's making $2.9 million all season. So if you prorate that to roughly now or around the deadline, if you take 25% of that deal, it's only about $215,000 that you're actually paying in hard money, in addition to the cap hit, which is obviously greater. So for teams that are looking to load up on an extra second-round pick or something to that effect, it's only going to cost you $200,000. And for what Minnesota did in the O'Reilly deal to get some extra draft, to get a fourth-round pick for $74,000, it's a little, in actual dollars, it is attractive. I heard Minnesota's been in the mix on this again. I heard Montreal's been in there. I believe Vancouver is an option as well because they're willing to retain money on an expiring deal. The Rangers have options to make this happen, and they're right there. I think it's a three-team race, by the way. I think it's the Rangers. I think the backup plan is Dallas. And if that doesn't happen, he'll stay in Chicago. I don't think Carolina's in there. I do not believe Vegas is an option for him. And I don't think Edmonton is either.
Well, and I mean, I remember, Kane's public comments, how disappointed he was that they made the Tarasenko trade, which sort of at the time seemed like he was taken out of it. Pretty interesting to see how things have come back around. And lo and behold, they're the Rangers again on one of the big fish. Jacob Chychrun is another name. We've been talking about him for a year and a half on the trade bait board. I mean, why hasn't he been dealt? He's not playing right now. And if you had to guess, Dave, I mean, how does this one get settled, or does it get settled by next Friday?
It doesn't have to. He's got 2 more years on that deal. They can do it in the summer, which would probably tick a lot of people off, including Chychrun. But this is look. Bill Armstrong believed he had a trade in place 2 weeks ago. So when when they pulled him from the lineup on February 11th, two Saturdays ago, they thought they had a deal in place. Obviously hasn't happened. So whatever changed has resulted in not only, and it was believed to be Los Angeles. So whatever changed, LA's still in the mix, but it's also allowed a few other teams to circle in and see if they can get in on this. The reason he hasn't been dealt, it's very similar to how Colorado and Joe Sakic handled Matt Duchene. They have a price. If you're not willing to pay it, we control the guy. We'll keep him. It's almost the exact same situation in Arizona right now in Tempe. So if teams are willing to pay the price, Bill Armstrong will pull the trigger tomorrow. But he's waiting for somebody to do it. Now, it's going to be a first-round pick. It's going to be a few other elements that are part of this too. A top prospect, and then depending as to who the prospect is it another pick? It could be as much as 4 assets. But Arizona has held very firm on this, and we'll obviously wait and see how this one kind of unfolds. They got 8 days to figure it out. I know they'd like to make it happen. I know he wants it to happen. It's just a matter of how can they pull this off. I think Boston's out because they've got a deal in place with Columbus right now for Gavrikov. We'll see how everything kind of unfolds. They've got backup plans too. I think McCabe's on their radar. But it looks like the field is narrowing, even though some teams have re-entered the mix. But yeah, almost everybody involved would love to see this come to a finality, including LA, who's wanted this guy for like 2 years.
Dave Pagnotta is with us from the Fourth Period. Go check out thefourthperiod.com for all the latest on the NHL trade deadline and news and rumblings from around the league. Just before we go, Dave, we've kind of talked about some of the players that have been most mentioned that are in demand. Is there a player or two that really hasn't been mentioned lately that all of a sudden you're hearing might be in the mix? Any new additions to your board?
You're going to hear probably a little bit more, and I don't think it's going to happen now. It might more likely be the summer. We heard his name pop up last trade deadline. It's going to creep up again. It's John Gibson in Anaheim. We heard last year that he was open to a trade. That kind of took a life of its own, and he had to come out and say, no, I'm happy in Anaheim and all that jazz. That's great, but he'd still be open to a trade now. So don't be surprised if we hear a little bit more on John Gibson. The reason I think it might be more summer, there's just not a market for him at this point. Unless Pittsburgh decides to totally change things up, move Jari, move another piece, and then compensate for him. Because Jari's a UFA, I don't think we're going to see too much on that front. Adam Henrique's name also in Anaheim. He's now week to week with a lower body injury. Teams might be willing to take a shot on him, but we'll have to kind of wait and see there. So he's certainly a name that I'm curious about and kind of looking at and seeing how can they make something happen. Josh Anderson in Montreal. It's been going on for the better part of the last few months, or several months, really going to the summer. But there seems to be a little bit of traction there with respect to teams re-entering and re-engaging in that discussion. I'd be a little bit surprised if it happens, but I wouldn't be shocked if we hear his name a little bit more over these next 8 days leading up to the deadline.
Hey, do you think, just quickly on the way out, do you think that we'll be seeing some bigger deals in the next few days, or is this going to be a staring match, especially amongst the teams in the West and the majority of the deals making the Duthies and whatnot happy because everything will be happening on deadline day?
I think it'll be active on deadline day, and I think we'll see a few moves trickle in over these next 8 days. Like I think the Gavrikov thing will come to a close soon enough. Luke Shen is going to get traded. I think there's also a deal in place there. They're just figuring out the financials. So we'll see that. Maybe Besser, because they've been trying to do that for some time. So I think we'll see, some impact type deals over these next 7 to 8 days. But on deadline day, I think it'll be active. It might not be the big, sexy, flashy names overall. I think we'll get one or two if they're not moved, beforehand. That's not including the Meyer and the Chikrin and whatnot. But I think we'll have a busy deadline day.
Dave, awesome stuff. Say hi to DB and the rest of the fellas, and we'll look forward to everything you guys have going on heading into next Friday and what should be a very interesting and busy NHL trade deadline day. Thanks for doing this, man.
Yep. You got it. Thanks for having me. Good
stuff. There's Dave Pagnotta. Give him a follow on Twitter at The Fourth Period, and be sure to check the guys' work out at thefourthperiod.com. All right, Rewucki's on deck. Travis Yost from TSN as well. Still to come. Got to give a big shout out to our friends at Royal Sports. I mentioned that Chiefs Super Bowl gear is there. All the best fan merchandise from around the league. 6 home games coming up. If you've been waiting to maybe add to your Jets gear, now's a great time to head down to Royal Sports. But of course, they're also the hockey superstore in town with the biggest selection when it comes to skates, equipment, and sticks. $1 million stick inventory, and a ton of them are on sale. Warrior sticks, 50% off. Huge selection available right now. So if you're looking for a great deal and need a new twig, head on down to Royal as well. And don't forget that massive snowboard department ready for you if you need to get ready for a spring break trip. It's all down at Royal Sports, the best in the biz, 750 Pembina Highway. Make sure to follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Speaking of clothing, guys, if you need to up the wardrobe, you know where to go. Andrew and the gang down at F Apparel are waiting for you with the best in men's clothing and custom suits beginning at just $400. Pick your color, fabric, style, and more. And a couple weeks later, you'll have an amazing new suit made to fit, custom, just starting at $400. Not just suits, though. Custom pants, golf pants, chinos, shirts for untucked, to be worn untucked and tucked in, and the best selection of men's accessories around as well. If you're in a wedding party, talk to them about a 15% discount when the entire wedding party gets their suits together from F Apparel. Don't waste your money on rentals. And of course, if you've got a 2023 high school grad in the family, why not get them a new suit to take that transition into the next step of their life? And when you do that, the young men will also receive a free custom shirt and tie valued at $150. It's all down at F Apparel, 190 Smith Street. Find out more or make an appointment today at that's EPH apparel.com. And just before we bring in Brandon Rewucki, it's freezing outside right now, but man, it's going to be hot tomorrow night down at Canada Life Center. If you're not going to the game, the next best place to gather with your friends to watch the Winnipeg Jets on the big screen with big sound is, of course, your local Boston Pizza, ice cold schooners, world famous Boston's wings, gourmet pizzas, and more. And if you're staying home because it's just too damn cold out, skip the cooking, order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, let's get back to the Jets. Travis Yost coming up in a few minutes. Brandon Rewucki, the host of Skates and Plates, joins us now. B, what's going on? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. What's going on with you?
Well, my stress levels have increased over the course of this road trip. Listen, Connor Hellebuck, what can you say about him and that performance that he put forth over the Rangers to salvage something out of this? And a hell of a goaltending matchup last night between Hellebuck and Sorokin. But it just seems like some of these issues that were sort of rearing their head over the last few weeks have almost been compounded over the last little while. A real lack of scoring anywhere in the bottom six, up and down performances, hot and cold from some of the guys in the top six. And it just seems like, man, when the Jets, don't handle the puck properly, it ends up in their own net. And that is certainly no fault of their goaltender. What do you make of the state of the Jets as the team comes back home to take on, the red-hot Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we're near the end of February now, and it almost seems like all of the issues we were worried about before the season starting have arrived just 4 or 5 months late, right? Like it's basically everything you touched on there. I mean, I think the biggest issue right now has to be the bottom six. I mean, they're just getting absolutely nothing. And there's going to be nights when your top six isn't going. There's going to be weeks or a week or a road trip where your top six isn't necessarily firing on all cylinders, and you need those guys further down the lineup to come in and contribute. And that's what the New York Islanders got on the game-winning goal. And the Winnipeg Jets certainly weren't anywhere near delivering that kind of result on their end of the ice there. So, I mean, that's been an issue that you and me have talked about for feels like a year now. And it was kind of mitigated earlier on in the season, or at least it wasn't as big of a concern as a lot of us had feared. But there's no doubt over the last month or so that this has become a major, major problem that needs to be corrected. And the only way it's going to be corrected is by outside help, by being active in the trade market. And the other thing is, and this is more of an internal issue. And I don't know what the fix is for this exactly, other than just bucking up a little bit and manning up and starting to bring in, night out. But it feels to me like there is a major lack of focus right now, a lack of sharpness. There's not that same attention to detail that we saw in the first couple months under Rick Bowness here. And I hope it's a wake-up call to the guys on the team that, you know what, you're not good enough to shy away from that every single night. Like Tampa Bay doesn't do it, but Tampa Bay could do it, right? Colorado could do. The Jets are not at that level, so maybe that. I don't know if there was a little, we're near first place in the West at the All-Star break, this or that. But I think this needs to be a huge splash of cold water in the face here, that if we don't do the little things right, we're not even going to give ourselves a chance to make noise come the middle of April, let alone May and June.
No, it's a great point. And I mean, while it's easy for us to sit here and say, the bottom six hasn't scored in forever, and and when the Jets score 3 goals, they win. So many of the problems that the Jets have had over the course of this game, the New Jersey third period, the 2 goals that went in last night against the New York Islanders, have been the result of just poor puck management and handling it. And Bones has talked about that before. And the thing that is so frustrating, I'm sure mostly for Rick and his staff, is that these, for the most part, are simple things that, you don't need a specialist. You don't need to detail like a bunch of crazy analytics. I mean, it is making the proper play and doing it well, making a crisp pass to the place that you need it. I mean, and maybe this is just an overreaction at this point in what is a long, long season, but you're exactly right. Some of the things that they did do well, that they seem to have focus on over the course of the first few months, there's been some erosion of that right now. And I think it's wreaking havoc not only in their own end, but also part of the reason why they haven't been able to spend as much time getting shots on net, creating quality in the offensive zone, is that there's been breakdowns before they even get to that point, and then spend the rest of the shift chasing the puck, trying to get it back.
Yeah, 100%. And I think puck management, as a team-wide issue, has been their biggest bugaboo pretty much since game 1. I mean, there's been some nightmarish evenings inside their own end where it's like, well, you're not being coached to do this, I would imagine here, right? But it just seems like every handful of games, they get into these ruts where they're just not making the correct decisions with the puck. And it could be, either they're not making the simple play where you just, bang it off the glass, live to fight another day, or they're just not making a stick-to-stick pass. But it just seemed like that Islanders game, again, was a great example of that, especially on the second goal where there was no danger there, right? Like that should have been a play that doesn't even get anywhere near towards the front of the net. Like Dylan DeMello plays the body really hard in the corner there. The Jets have the puck and they have the Islanders outnumbered. Like how does a play like that end up at the back of your net within 3 seconds? But it's a bad pass by Kyle Connor to Kevin Stenlund, who is kind of pivoting. He can't feed in the puck in that moment there, and then it's a couple turnovers, ends up at the back of your net, right? Like it's just little plays like that have been killing this club. Having said that too, it's also not like they're not playing completely awful, because I thought to an extent they kind of got goalied in that game against the Islanders too. So there is like a little bit of optimism here in the sense that, it's not all the Rangers game where it's, hey, Hellebuck, we need you to make
the game that they won.
Saves. Yeah, of course, the one game that they won here. I thought they outplayed Columbus, and I thought they outplayed the Islanders. But those are the issues that you're talking about, where the Jets are turning 2 points into 0 points. And that's frustrating. I think that's where a lot of the negative sentiment is right now. It's not that this team stinks. It's just that they're making life way too hard on themselves. And if they can get back on track here, and again, get some help in a week, and maybe we still might have something cooking.
Speaking of a week, it'll be interesting. We usually do our chats on Thursday here on Winnipeg Sports Talk when you jump on with us, and that'll be one day to the deadline. We'll see whether something happens before then, or this staring match continues and we get down to, that final day when all the activity happens. But I mean, our conversations for the past few weeks have been, do you go all in for a Timo Meier, a top 6 forward, or do you, figure out what you're able to give up and try and acquire a difference maker on the blue line? we hadn't spent a lot of time really any time talking about multiple acquisitions to completely change the bottom six. After this road trip in this last month or so, and you look at the scoring droughts of so many of the players that are getting significant minutes that have not been able to do anything offensively, the more I think about this, I'm not sure that if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, there's all of a sudden a plan C that involves, trading a number of the assets that you were ready to do it, but instead of going for one player, multiple additions to really significantly shake up really everything from line 2 to line 4 in the forward group.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. And it's kind of why I've been leaning towards putting premier assets to a blue liner, because you're just going after one, and then you can kind of go bargain shopping up front. Because, look, Timo Meier would be great. I'm not going to complain if the Jets go out there and acquire him. You get high-end talent, go out there and get high-end talent. I'll find a way to talk myself into being super jacked for Timo Meier. But the Jets do have 2 number 1 centermen. They do have 2 top-line wingers. They have, against all odds maybe, a 35, 36-year-old that's playing pretty close to a first-line level so far. That they're not lacking high-end talent up front. There is a major hole in terms of some big-time impact on that third line. And Adam Lowry was great earlier on in the season, where we're starting to see his production, maybe even his level of play, tail off a little bit here. I think just turbocharging that third line and having a guy that can come in there and then maybe spell Cole Perfetti on the second line, depending on what happened. And obviously his injury plays another role in all of this, how long he's going to be out for. But to me, that's where the Jets don't necessarily need to be talking about, do we need to give up a top prospect or top picks to help round out our forward core? We see all the time guys get moved for relatively cheap at the trade deadline that can still bring you a major impact come playoff time. And
one other thing with that, for a Jets perspective, that is definitely in their favor is the cap space that they have.
Yeah.
I mean, there will be teams that will be looking to move a player, or hell, there'll be other teams that are going to need to make room for guys that might have expendable players that can help the Winnipeg Jets. And that cap space is something that will be incredibly valuable for them if they are looking to make multiple additions. That being said, I think they still would love to get a real true impact player in that top 6. And obviously number 1 on the wish list is a Timo Meier. It's going to cost a significant number of assets to get him. And it's complicated. And maybe that need is even more with the obvious concern that the team has about Cole Perfetti. And Bones has sort of been non-committal on it. They're waiting for a doctor's report. But the fact that he went straight to the IR, I think, tells us that this is maybe not the day-to-day thing that people had thought of when he wasn't in the lineup, because, of course, he was on the ice when the empty netter was scored against New Jersey with the goalie pulled at the end. That being said, after further review, as they say, it doesn't look like it's good news for Cole Perfetti. And, I mean, that's just another need of a guy that, albeit I think he's got 2 goals in his last 24 games. He certainly wasn't tearing it up. But if all of a sudden he is out there, there's no one there knocking on the door that says, hey, I'm a top 6 player right now. I can contribute, because it's been zeros throughout the third and fourth line.
Yeah. They're not contributing in the bottom 6. I don't anticipate somebody stepping up to fill the shoes up there on the first or second line. And look, he 2 goals in 24 games, on pace for 50 points this year. That's still a pretty massive hole for a club that doesn't really have any reinforcements, like you touched on, to come in there and fill them right away. I guess, if you're talking about semi-serious injury for Perfetti here, you're probably hoping for something like 4 to 6 weeks, and then he's back for the last handful of games in the regular season. But it's tough to kind of put any sort of a timeline on that without knowing what he's dealing with right now. But I mean, that's what we saw in the Islander game too. I thought, in that Mason Appleton, I think, could be a good third liner. His limits are exposed pretty quickly when he's out there with Scheifele and Ehlers, or Scheifele and Connor. It just that's not the kind of game that he can play right now. The same goes, I think, for Morgan Barron, and you can go up and down the lineup, and the guys that are with the team right now, and even some guys with the Moose. There's nobody in house right now that can fix and fill those spots. So This to me is 100% on the general manager right now. And how you go about filling that, I mean, waivers might even be a possibility as well, depending on some of the guys that could potentially be thrown out there. It'll be really intriguing to see who Chevy's targets are going to be up front if Timo Meier isn't one of the guys that's being brought in, because there's some guys that, I like their games, but do you want to pay a first or a second at plus for them when, you might not be necessarily getting that kind of value back? Or do you take a flyer on some guys that might only cost a 4th round pick and hope that they're able to shore the gaps for the next couple of weeks?
We were just talking with Pagnotta about a bunch of the big names and the trades that have been made, and it is really interesting. I mean, all the aggression has been in the East. Tarasenko goes early to the Rangers. Of course, the Leafs make the Ryan O'Reilly trade. Bo Horvat was the first domino to fall well advance of when people thought he would trade it. And then you've got the West right now. And if anything, it's jockeying moves like Vegas made yesterday, trading the great Shea Weber to the Arizona Coyotes. But, I mean, this is sort of a staring match. And I do wonder whether, at least amongst those West teams, whether one team will make a deal and then dominoes start falling very quickly, or whether there will be an advantage for the team that jumps first as opposed to waiting for what probably will be a crazy day next Friday on the 3rd of March.
Yeah, the Arizona money launderers are putting together quite the 2016.
Yost called it a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, thank you. I can't believe nobody talks about this enough. Like, this is just it's the ultimate joke. It's complete. It's so beyond Bush League that we're still doing this, and it would be funny to see them go after like a Carey Price or a Ben Bishop too, just to round out the starting lineup, because the goaltender is all that they're missing right now. But it's just despicable. But you're right. I wonder if it's maybe a case of playing chicken right now. And this is the fascinating part of being a GM to me. And I always wonder too, like, because so many GMs are former players or things like that. Like, do they take negotiating classes? Like, right? Because no player has any experience in terms of using things like leverage and different things like that. Like, I don't know if they got Phil Hellmuth on staff in terms of trying to help out bargaining, but this is kind of the really the really intriguing aspect of being a general manager is not only like, okay, who do we need to target? Who's the guy we want to go after? But when do we want to make that move? Right? Because that's I think a really underrated aspect of doing things properly as well. Like, can we give up a 3rd round pick instead of a 2nd round pick? Like little different things like that can give you an edge. That's what I think we're starting to see come into play here. That's more from the acquiring side, but from the seller side here, like you've got to try to drum up a market as best as you can here. And that's the other aspect of this. Is, do you think you'll get more value next Friday, or is it just let's cash in our chips right now and get whatever we can for the guy?
Well, man, can you imagine being a fly on the wall in Mike Greer's office right now?
Yeah, exactly.
With the asset, I mean, and we won't even get to Carlson, but I mean, just specifically about Meier, with the amount of people and the amount of teams that have interest in him, would like to go. I mean, I think he's just being more than happy on sitting back and letting the offers grow. And it will be incumbent if a team wants to go in and just say, let's get this done now. The return for Meier could be beyond what anyone speculated even a couple weeks ago, because I think of the arms race and the fact, Brandon, when you look at the East, we haven't seen this in years, and certainly not the case in the West, but there's a whole bunch of teams, Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit, that are still in the mix for potentially being in the playoffs and have games in hand, which I think has made it far more a seller's market than it has been in the past. And no one in a better position right now than Mike Greer.
Yeah, you're banging on there. That's why I wonder if, unless somebody just steps up to the plate and hits a home run and says, hey, whatever you want, that's yours. We're going to make it happen. I'm not going to be shocked if this one goes down to the wire. And the same goes for a lot of the other premium. I mean, the Chychrun thing at this point, who the hell knows? I mean, that's it's not going to shock me if that one comes to the summer too. But I'm not going to be surprised as well if sometime in the coming days we hear a report leaked out that the Sharks are potentially willing to hold on to Timo Meier until this upcoming summer to make a trade then, right? To try to drum up a little more leverage or whatever they can to get a bigger deal here. So I guess from Winnipeg's perspective in this, in terms of trying to figure out what Chevy is going to do and then maybe even when he's going to do it. I think we look at what he's done in the past, and I believe when he's made the big splashes, both Stastny and Hayes were acquired the morning of the trade deadline, right? So I'm pretty sure I was leaving the station, right after both of those things happened. So
yeah, the Stastny one, I vividly remember coming in before the show and doing a double take. Like, yeah, excuse me, what? Paul Stastny?
Yeah.
What?
Exactly, right? So I mean, if I'm a Jets fan, I'm probably, I might take a couple days off refreshing Twitter every handful of minutes here, because we're looking at past actions trying to predict what somebody's going to do in the present. I think Chevy's going to play this one right down to the wire. We'll see. And on top of that, too, he makes the big splash in the morning, and then he makes a couple other trades later on in the day. So yeah, Friday's probably going to be a bit of a beauty for Jets fans.
Yeah, well, you're invited. We'll probably do. I remember last year was right when I had acquired COVID for the first time, and I had my Michael Jordan flu game show where we went 4 hours instead of 2. So hopefully I'll be feeling better, but we probably will do a much bigger show. So I don't know whether we maybe want to move you to hang out for a while with us on Friday if you've got the time. We'll check out schedules next week.
Put me in a mimosa hour. I'll be there for mimosa hour.
Excellent. I'll get a couple pictures ready for you. Just quickly, I'm still, and I'm gonna ask Travis Yost about this. What are the Sens doing? Like, they get rid of the Zaitsev deal now after having him on the books, not helping the team for a long, long time. Trade, was it a second and a fourth to do it? The only thing I can think of is that, they're actually quite serious about maybe making another deal as a buyer and needed the cap space and the ability to do it right now.
Yeah, that's not going to surprise me at all. And there, I mean, you think the Jets have a hole in the back end? Ottawa's got, a couple, but some pretty significant ones as well. So if you're trying to read the tea leaves there, it does seem like they're opening up space to do something and do something big. And remember, too, like Alex DeBrincat is an upcoming RFA, I believe, right? And there's no guarantee that he's necessarily going to want to stay in Ottawa despite everything sounding okay. They don't have to make the playoffs necessarily, but they can't be what they were in the first half of the season, which is a complete dumpster fire. And so going out there and acquiring somebody and doing that to somebody with term as well, I think that's going to be the MO we see from the Sens here. So who's that going to be? I mean, it's interesting. There's a few guys out there that might have some ties to the Ottawa area. I'm pretty sure David Pagnotta, who was just on here, made mention that Mackenzie Weegar maybe isn't all that happy, and pretty sure Weegar is either an Ottawan, whatever it's called. I'm pretty sure he's from the area there. So I'm not going to be shocked to see the Sens maybe make a bit of a splash, but I don't think it's going to be a rental for them. I think they're going to go after somebody big on the blue line, and it's going to be somebody with a lot of term and a lot of cap hit as well. So who that's going to be, not so sure yet. But yeah, I imagine that they're not going to be in selling mode despite having to leapfrog like 4 or 5 teams to get a wild card spot.
Well, you know what? It's funny because, I mean, one of the teams that, has been kind of rumored to be kicking the tires on Colton Parayko has been Ottawa. And I know Ken's brought him up from a Jets perspective as well. And I can tell you what, I would not be doing cartwheels if that was the acquisition that the Winnipeg Jets made. And I guess there is something to be said for cost certainty, a long-term deal, and, guy. And again, he's got a no trade. So good luck on getting a player to be in St. Louis where you've won a cup and you've just signed an 8-year deal to waive it in year 1 with 7 years left. But to be perfectly honest, I mean, I guess could he help you now? For sure. You want that on the books for 7 years? I mean, at what point do you get into a situation where you're paying the player for his past performance with someone else's team, and that becomes somewhat of an anchor for a long time? The guy can still play, and certainly he'd be an upgrade, but man, 7 years is a long, long time when all of those 7 years are on the other side of 30, on the back nine of a guy's career.
I actually think Parayko is a riskier acquisition than Erik Karlsson is, to be honest with you. And you're talking about a pretty similar level of injury history as well. I mean, he's had a bad back for a long time. And as somebody with a bad back, the 30s are not the cure for what might ail you in terms of the lower back situation there. So yeah, I honestly don't think I want any part of Colton Parayko to Winnipeg. There's just way too much risk there. And to me, the biggest alarm bells out of all of it is, he's been with St. Louis his whole career. Why would the Blues in year one of that 8-year contract already be looking to move on from him, right? Like that to me is the biggest. I don't know if we should be taking the plunge here despite having somebody that would be here for the long term. So I just don't think that the timing would be right on that trade. And you're bang on. Like if it's cup winning Colton Parayko, that's a special player. But I don't think he's that guy right now, and I don't think, unfortunately, he's ever going to be that guy again.
Yeah, well, and listen, just bring it back to the Winnipeg Jets, and I know you and I have talked about how interested we'd be in an acquisition of a player like Jacob Chychrun and what that would do, and I guess it still does make sense with a couple years left on the deal. But man, the way the team's been playing as of late, I mean, I think I'm more like the more I watch this team struggle to score goals and have issues with some of the simple things. I think they've done a good job to get where they are this year, but I think we are seeing the law of diminishing returns right now with the players they have in the bottom six. And even outside of those top kind of star players that have been doing all the scoring, if I'm Cheveldayoff, I mean, I'm maybe making multiple calls and looking at multiple assets to bring in a number of players to really get a completely new mix amongst the other forward group. Because I think the scoring is going to come for, Scheifele's going to get his, Connor's going to get his. It was nice for Ehlers to finally break that 10-game goal-scoring slump, and hopefully he can get hot. Wheeler will be in the mix as part of all of that. Of course, you've got Dubois. We'll see what happens with Perfetti. But this team, I mean, making the playoffs, okay, fine. I mean, you're not going to win anything in even the first round, regardless of who you play, if you cannot get some contributions and at least be even or ahead at times with your third and fourth line out on the ice. And that just simply has not happened for the better part of the last 6 weeks around here.
Yeah, the Jets are no doubt certainly testing my patience on the let's go after an elite blue liner here instead of beefing up the middle six there, right? Like it's each passing game, it's like maybe we save Chychrun for another year and we try to find somebody that can score a freaking goal for us. I mean, I have seen people float around the potential idea, and I'm seeing more and more of his name being tossed out there in the trade market. Like, if you want to go big, like maybe you go after Chychrun and Nick Schmaltz in Arizona and make this just one big package deal and try to fix all of your issues in one fell swoop. Like maybe that's something that might intrigue Chevy. Like he hasn't gotten the blockbuster shoes on since the Evander Kane one, talking about making like a 7 or an 8 player trade or something like that. But maybe that's something that you go about doing. I guess ultimately though, even if you're somebody like me who thinks that getting a number one blue liner behind Josh Morrissey is maybe the biggest thing this team needs to do, it can't be the only thing. Like that's I think what's become real apparent over this last stretch here is that I mean even just getting a guy like Timo Meier, is that even enough for this team, right? Like I think they are probably 2 to 3 and most likely 3 pieces away from being a legit contender in the Western Conference. And that's, just looking at the teams and what they have right now. Like, never mind if Colorado goes out and gets a second line center. And then Vegas goes out with all the cap space they might have now for this year and next to get an impact player. Dallas as well is in the market, right? Like the Jets, I think realistically need to look at 3 assets coming in here to help fortify what they have right now. How they go about spending that's I think the big debate right now. But I also think it's fair to say that one forward isn't going to alleviate all the scoring issues that are happening right now in Winnipeg. You're probably going to need to bring 2 outside names into the mix to help fortify the bottom 6 at the very least.
Watch him put up 7 tomorrow against the Avs.
Probably, yeah.
Hey, listen, we take it.
Yeah.
There certainly do. I mean, I said yesterday on the show, we were jumping on a Nick Ehlers goal prop last night against the Islanders. I don't care that it's Sorokin. There's no way this guy can go this long without scoring. He got one. I think we're at that point for a number of guys in the bottom 6, even though they're not quite in the category of Nikolai Ehlers. Fill us in on what's coming up on Skates and Plates over the next couple days.
Yeah, new episode coming out tomorrow. A week before the deadline, so that's going to be the primary focus there. Any games that might be of importance or maybe under the radar that teams could go for. Also, I try to watch as many Oscar movies as I can, like around this time. And the last one I think I haven't seen is The Whale with Brendan Fraser. And I watched the trailer for it on Amazon Prime.
Is that the one where he's like 600 pounds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I have never seen a sadder trailer in my life. And I don't think I'm gonna be able to watch it. Like it looks too heartbreaking. And then I was just thinking, like, what are the saddest movies of all time, or the saddest scenes of all time? There's some heavyweight contenders there, especially like now that I have a little one. The Pixar movies are just a nightmare. Like it's Kleenex and like sleepless nights galore. So I like the people at Pixar suck with what they do with their movies. But I don't know if you're like big into tearjerkers or rom-coms or anything like that. So dude, I might not be asking the right person.
I'll be watching AEW from Wednesday night or something and playing video games and. And listen, to be honest, I'm getting enough sleepless nights and Kleenex from the local hockey team in this road trip they've just been on lately. So I'm gonna pass on that one. However, just quickly, have you been watching any of the Full Swing, the Netflix series on the PGA Tour?
Yeah, I have. I'm about like 5 or 6 episodes in. I was pretty disappointed with the first few. It was hyped.
The Joel Damon one was incredible.
The Joel Damon one, that one brought me back in. I honestly think the best one so far has been the Brooks Koepka one, because he's lost.
Speaking of being depressed.
Like, oh my God. I don't know if we've ever gotten access to an athlete who's been like at the peak of to where he looks like there was that sequence of him trying to make 5-foot putts on the green, and he's just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I can't do this. It was like that to me was fascinating. Some of the other stuff has been kind of disappointing. So I'll see how the last few episodes fill out there. But man, I was just blown away that a guy like that was like the Terminator, right? Like the person everybody feared come Sunday in any kind of major, all of a sudden might not be able to break 70 at Pine Ridge.
Just by the way, because we got to get to Travis Yost right away, but just on golf, the Live Tour is starting in Mayakoba. This is their first bit. I'm not sure whether you're a big Cleeks guy or Stinger XC or maybe Range Goats, but apparently it's not on YouTube anymore. Do we even get the CW network? Like, are we going to be able to watch this in Canada?
I don't think so.
Well, anyways, it won't probably be a huge loss, but I didn't mind the YouTube broadcasts of it. It was actually pretty good, but maybe we'll have to get the app and we can watch it here in Canada on that. Rewucki, have a good one. I'll look forward to the latest Skates and Plates, folks. Pick it up wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and we'll talk about next week to maybe do a little something extended style on trade deadline day if you want to jump on.
I'm ready whenever you need me, man. Sounds great, and have a great weekend.
Right on. Thanks so much. There's Brandon Rewucki. Give him a follow on Twitter, and make sure you're subscribed to Skates and Plates wherever you get your favorite podcasts. All right. This next interview, I think you're going to really enjoy. Travis Yost, one of our favorites from TSN, coming up right away. Before we do that, though, got to give a big thanks to our friends at Princess Auto with their Princess Auto Curling Report. And let's see what's cracking at the Scotties right now. Up-to-date standings are as follows. Carey Einerson, after another win this morning over Alberta, 7-0, locked and loaded for first place in the pool. Jennifer Jones, who I believe, let's see, is Jen on the ice right now? Or I guess that'll be coming up a little later on, is one game behind the McCarville rink, who's already at 7-1. Just going to check draw 17 this afternoon. And yes, Manitoba Jones going up against the New Brunswick rink. The other wildcard rink, Walter, going up against Newfoundland. Galusha, the big Northwest Territories Yukon battle. And Rachel Homan coming up this afternoon. Their second of 2 games today. They'll wrap the wild card, or they'll wrap the round robin, I should say, tonight. tiebreakers tomorrow, and the playoffs. Will be all over it here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Of course, special good luck to Jennifer Jones from our friends at Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Manitoba Champions. And, of course, our pal Reed Carruthers, who's coming to the Briar, joined us yesterday for a great visit. As he, of course, is out coaching Carey Einerson's team as they look to make it 4 Scotties in a row. Princess Auto is the place where you find the best assortment, best deals on the assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Can't thank our friends at Culligan Water enough for their great support of Winnipeg Sports Talk. Family owned for over 65 years as the go-to people for water and water services in Winnipeg and Manitoba. And they've got it all. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop down and see him in person at 1200 Sargent Avenue. You can give him a phone call at 204-694-5180 and check out everything they've got going on for you and your family when it comes to water online at drinkculligan.com. Hey, Bomber fans, if you missed earlier this week, we had Kenny Lawler on the program, who was all fired up to get back to IG Field and try and get back on top of the Canadian Football League with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I know many of us are fired up to get back to IG Field and see friends, watch the Bombers win football games, and have a couple CCs down at the Rum Hut or the amazing Canadian Club and Ginger Ale available in cans. Well, that'd be a little bit of a wait till we get back to IG Field, but in the meantime, you can pop by your local liquor marts and get Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club, the official sponsor of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. All right, let's welcome in TSN hockey columnist Travis Yost for a wide-ranging conversation on the East versus West, where the Jets are right now, and the continued brilliance of Jets goaltender Connor Hellebuyck. Travis, great to catch up again. How are you?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Well, we're doing okay. I can tell you that the Jet fan base has a major case of the nerves lately. I don't know where this team would be without Connor Hellebuyck, but I can tell you right now, it's been a rough 4-6 weeks for this team. I mean, I know you follow the entire league, but what do you make of the plight of the Jets right now, coming off a road trip where basically they got 2 points solely on the back of their all-star netminder?
It felt like, I was going to say a throwback, but you don't have to throw it back that far. I think the concerning part is when you watch Winnipeg over the last month, they look like the team that we've grown accustomed to from like 2017 to 2021, which is they are an extremely mediocre team that looks great when Connor Hellebuyck is erasing goal after goal. And if he's not doing that, they really struggle. They don't control the pace of play. They tend to get hemmed in their defensive zone. They tend to bleed chances against. And even if Hellebuyck's on his game, that makes it very hard to not only play a transition style, but also to generate meaningful offense. And I think the disappointing, or at least frustrating part, if you're a Jets fan, is the first 3 months of the year. I mean, they were reasonably healthy, but more importantly, their top six. I mean, the core strength of this team is in the top six and on the wings. And not only were they scoring, it felt like at will in some games, but they were sustaining a lot of pressure and time with the puck in the offensive zone. And the average Winnipeg victory was not, oh, well, Hellebuyck had 47 saves. It was, yeah, Winnipeg played great. They have a goaltender advantage in literally every matchup they'll play, unless maybe it's against Tampa. You know what I mean? But I think that the rollback into like, yep, we win if Hellebuyck can stop 46 shots. I mean, it's just, you cannot win like that in the modern era of hockey. It's too goaltender reliant. He's insanely good. I could probably talk for 2 hours about how good Hellebuyck is, but I think that the creep of the lack of controlling the puck and not returning to the Winnipeg lineup is, I don't want to say blinking red lights, but it's starting to feel like the team that really couldn't qualify for the playoffs on a multi-year stretch. And on top of that, if they don't rally or recover, I still think this is very much a playoff team. Don't get me wrong, but it's hard to see how they match up against some of the better teams in the league.
Well, and listen to me, before we even get to the playoffs, we got to get to the trade deadline. And I mean, our conversations around here, revolved around, do the Jets go big game hunting and really get in on a player like Timo Meier? Do they add some depth? It's potentially the blue line. I mean, when you look at the body of work over the past month of this team, they've got absolutely zero scoring from their bottom six. And things have sort of dried up amongst the top guys as well. And I think things have really compounded for Kevin Cheveldayoff when he looks around the league and has to make some crucial decisions for the immediate present, but also the future of the franchise, considering the contract status of some of his most important players, starting with Connor Hellebuck.
You brought up two players. I mean, I think Winnipeg has to be a buyer. They've kind of been, I'm trying to figure out the right phrase, sitting on their hands, so to speak, the last few years. And I don't think many teams would have acted much differently because they were an exceptionally average team, right? Some talent, some holes. The blue line was a wreck for years. But so, at different points, at different seasons, it may not have made sense to go, quote, big game hunting. I will say this. If Winnipeg may not be an elite team. They're not an elite team. But this is probably the weakest you're going to see a conference in probably the next few years. The Western Conference is just awful. It is absolutely awful. They get their teeth kicked in every time they play against the East. And I think if you're a Jets fan or if you're in the Jets front office, if you're looking around, it's like, yeah, we may not be great, but show me the great teams in the West. Like, yep, Vegas is playing pretty well. Colorado's terrifying when they're healthy. Dallas has had a great year. But, none of these teams feel like truly unbeatable where you look across the aisle and the Eastern Conference is just a close-range knife fight, across at least the top 7 teams in that conference. I do think two things. Number one, Timo Meier is a game changer. The trade deadline hyping of players is sometimes obnoxious and nauseating. And usually it's like, this third line forward with 6 career goals can change your franchise future. And it's just painstaking to listen to sometimes. Timo Meier is not that guy. I mean, Timo Meier is a bona fide playmaker. He's a high-end scorer. He would fit in like a glove in that Winnipeg top 6. I think he's interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you think you can retain him and it's worth, and you see a lot of that with teams giving up conditional picks to see if they can, negotiate an extension. Meier is a phenomenal rental, and he's a phenomenal long-term ad for Winnipeg. Both of those are true. He also greatly changes that team's playoff fate. He would also push someone down the lineup. The reason why I bring that up is I think if you're talking about the biggest area of weakness right now, I mean, they are getting nothing from their bottom 6. And I know the scoring in the top 6 is slowed, but those are the guys you're betting on over the course of a season, multiple seasons. They're going to have scoring slumps, but on average, they're going to win. They have nothing further down the lineup. And I do wonder, I was talking to someone with a team a couple days ago about different options that may be out there. Barbashev in St. Louis is interesting in that respect because he can probably be had for a fraction of the cost if you're Winnipeg, if you're looking for depth forward. And he's a reasonable top 9 playmaker that's going to be available and cost a fraction of what Timo Meier will. The other thing is, if I'm Timo Meier or if I'm a team willing to pay a serious price, even though Meier may seem like a very logical fit in Winnipeg, the team that I keep looking at is Carolina. For the life of me, I can't figure out why Carolina would not make one of their big all-in moves here, bring Meier in. I think they could become the consensus favorite in the East, which is saying something. And on top of that, I think Meier may...
It's because of the way things have gone over the past month. And as you pointed out, the opportunity that lies in the West. I mean, even with the Jets and the Dallas Stars playing very mediocre over the last little while, they're still at the top of the Central Division. But it's completely packed in. And I mean, do you see this the same way as I do, that there's basically 9 teams going for 8 spots right now in the West? And it did create sort of a funny situation. I was out with a bunch of buddies watching the game last night, and the Jets had lost. And all of a sudden, we're sitting there cheering for the Arizona Coyotes and the Chicago Blackhawks to get wins just to sort of, minimize the bleeding right now.
Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of being a fan in a playoff hunt, right? You find yourself up on a Friday night watching a Coyotes game. That's the sick part of being a fan or being within a team for that matter. But I think it is 9 teams for 8 spots, but I really, really do think underscore, how many of those 9 teams are good? I think that is a really important question for the Jets front office to answer, because it absolutely goes to the risk reward of what you do at the trade deadline. I mean, you're only so good. You're only as good as the team that you're playing against. In the NHL's brilliant playoff format, Winnipeg, reality is they are a flawed team amidst the sea of flawed teams. And again, yeah, a healthy Colorado is terrifying. That's true. Vegas still looks like a pretty damn good team. And Dallas, I mentioned earlier, but does Dallas feel unbeatable if you're Winnipeg? Absolutely not. Does Vegas feel unbeatable? Probably not. Does Colorado feel beatable if they're still dealing with injuries? Probably not, especially the way they've played. So I think it goes to the calculus and the decision that they're making. And, yeah, like Winnipeg needs to wake out of their slumber. But you know what can wake a team out of a slumber? Getting a player like Timo Meier. So that to me is really the fascinating part of this, is how much do the Jets – I don't want to say panic react, but more so react in terms of what they're seeing around them. Because this conversation that we're having right now about the Jets' struggles, when has this conversation not happened in any other Western Conference market this season, including Edmonton, including Vegas, including Dallas? That's just kind of been the flavor in the West this year. So that to me is where really the rubber meets the road for the front office in terms of deciding what they're going to do.
It really is a great point. Travis Yost is with us, from hockey columnist for TSN at TSN.ca. You know, the Jets were playing the Rangers earlier this week, and we were setting up the game on the show. We were sort of looking at the standings, and we're going, the Rangers are 6th in the East right now and would be clearly the number 1 team in the Western Conference. I mean, you've done quite a bit of work and some great stuff up on your Twitter feed, but can you put into perspective for our listeners on just how tilted this league is right now, currently heading into the deadline between the East and the West?
Well, there's two things at play here. Number one, the NHL's playoff format is the worst thing the NHL has in the league right now, full stop. Like I have been saying this since the year they rolled it out, that if you create a divisional-based playoff format on top of a conference scheduling regular season, where you've got 16 teams bifurcated, and then you're splitting off 8 teams across 4 divisions, and then forcing those teams to merge out of their division, and you force the 2 seed to play the 3 seed in each division, you have to get some spirit of what the playoff actually means. You have to have a talent balance across old playoff format across the conferences, which we've seen shifts in talent across East to West, West to East. That's always going to happen. This now in the last 7 years, they've decided, okay, you have to come out of your own division. Well, now you've got a second layer of inefficiency. So if you look, and it's almost comical, you're going to have these ridiculous 2 versus 3 matchups in the East. And of course, all I ever hear is, oh, everyone's complaining now because of the Maple Leafs. No, that's nonsense. I remember when St. Louis, Chicago played back-to-back 2 years in a row when they were 2 of the 5 best teams in the league. This has nothing to do with any one team. The format is just garbage. But the issue here, and the issue with this season specifically, and why I'm hoping it's going to be a change agent, but I'm not going to hold my breath, the 2 divisions in the East are not only consensus better than the 2 divisions in the West. You need not do anything but look at how these divisions, how each team has played out of division to understand that. Like if you look at the Atlantic Division, they have beaten up on every single division in the league. If you look at the Metro, they have beaten up on every single division in the league except for the Atlantic. In the Central and the Pacific, they have only the teams that have moved to the top of the standings in the Central and the Pacific, by and large, have done so because they are the best teams in the West, and they're beating the weaker teams in the West. When they play teams out East, they're getting crushed. And I think that, again, it goes to the trade deadline calculus of all these teams, number one. But I think the other interesting part for me in a lot of this is you now have a situation. I think as last week, I don't know if it's still true, the top 6 teams in the East all would have outseeded any team in the West. And I just, the arguments about scheduling imbalances and travel and logistics, I feel like are so secondary to what the spirit of the playoffs should be, which is you've got this 82-game regular season. Don't you want to create a format, though, if not perfect, does try and reward teams who do well in the regular season and try and create a system where the teams that win the titles are generally some of the best teams in the league? You're not going to get that right, but that is the North Star. And the league has just decided it may as well just throw 16 teams in a random pot and assign these games in the first round. So this imbalance is significant. But I think what's interesting and where I'm following this, I've been writing about it for years, but you're starting to see verbalization from players. Sidney Crosby, I think during the break a few weeks ago, had mentioned like he'd like to see the playoff format roll back to the old 1-8. I think you're going to see more of that because I think when the dust settles, you're going to have two matchups in the first round in the East where the weaker seeded team is going to be substantially better than the team that's getting home ice in the 2-3 in the West. And I don't think that the league can say what they want. I don't really think that's what they actually want on paper, right? And until they solve what is going to be a perpetual talent imbalance issue that is just going to keep rotating around the league every year, then this format will never work.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because, I mean, we were sort of touching on that earlier this week. And, I mean, just right now, I mean, if we started the playoffs today, you've got a Toronto-Tampa first-round series. You've got a Jersey Rangers first-round series. Two teams will be out in the first round. And if you put those teams based on their record in the West, they'd have home ice throughout the playoffs.
The maybe the most compelling argument, because I get this is something, you know, sometimes you write stuff or sometimes you think about stuff and you're like, I'm not as confident. I kind of feel right. I'm so confident about this. It's not even funny. And the reason why, look at the three absolute garbage teams out in the East, right? You got Montreal, you got Columbus, you got Philadelphia. Go look at their goal differentials against the Western Conference this year. So if you look at Columbus, they're like, I don't know, 5 to 8 goals in the red against Western Conference teams and like 50 against the East. The Flyers have a positive goal differential against the Western Conference teams. It's like in Montreal, same exact thing as Columbus. Almost entirely their losses and their massively negative goal differential is all born from just ugly losses in the East. So even the terrible teams, because I saw that argument, the Torontos and the Tampas and the Carolinas, they get fat off these weak teams. Not true at all. Not true at all. And actually the opposite is true. It's the top teams in the Western Conference that are getting fat off the weak teams in the Western Conference. And anyways, it's not the point about any division, any conference, any team. You're just going to have this if you force the 2 and the 3 teams to play each other in the division in the first round every single year. Every single year, if you look back, I think there was one year where you didn't have broken seeding, upside down seeding. Every single season since it's been indoctrinated, there's been at least 1 to 2 teams injured by the matchup that they're in, just be merely because of the division they play in, and 1 to 2 teams that have benefited. I don't remember that. Do you remember that Vancouver-Calgary series like six years ago in the first round?
Sure.
I mean, they were the two worst teams in the playoffs, and they played each other in the first round. I mean, that's I don't know how the league can allow that.
It's certainly a head scratcher, but they're creating rivalries, Travis. Don't forget, they're creating.
Do you believe that? I mean, seriously, do you believe that? Does that feel?
No, it's a joke. Come on.
It sounds every time they say it, more and more it comes off like just sales and marketing like speak. And look, I get it. Like the 80s and 90s were really born from this. Hockey was such a localized sport. Most sports were, for that matter. There was much more. First off, it was way harder to travel, way more painful to travel. These teams fly private. They have incredible accommodations. This is a global, the world is global now. Everyone, if you look around other leagues, the NBA, Major League Soccer, rivalries are born from competition by and large, right? Yes, Ottawa and Montreal are always going to hate each other, but like the real rivalries in sport tend to come from teams playing each other in meaningful games, and that's the lion's share of it. Not, hey, we're 60 miles. No one cares that Toronto and Buffalo were rivals the last 10 years. Who cared about that? They were terrible. And it goes to the point of like, stop focusing so much in geography, focus more on building competitive matchups because people tune in for best on best. They don't want to watch amateurish stuff.
Travis, bringing it back to the Jets for a minute, as freaked out as people are about this recent play of the club, the backbone of this team is Connor Hellebuyck. We talked about his performance on this road trip already, but you had a really interesting piece that you put out on social media earlier about just how good Connor Hellebuyck has been really since he joined the Winnipeg Jets and came into the league. Can you explain that for our listeners, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, sure. So I looked at it. I wanted to include Henrik Lundqvist, but he predated the statistical modern era, which we draw the line in 2007, 2008. But what I wanted to show was, So Connor Hellebuck's about 425 games into his career, a pretty good sample. And we already know he's an elite goalie. We already know he's one of the better goaltenders in the last 20 years. But I think that list, there is a very, 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 very short list of goaltenders I think I'd put over Hellebuck over the last 2 decades. I'm pretty sure I'd put Henrik Lundqvist. But what I started looking at was, okay, Carey Price, Jonathan Quick, these goalies who came in and won Stanley Cups, had incredible peaks. Now, Quick is not the same goalie anymore. I get it. Price, his career cratered pretty quickly after that 2017-18 season. But what I looked at was, show me the first 425 games of Carey Price. Show me the first 425 games of Jonathan Quick. And then after a bunch of people asked, I also then picked other random stretches over their career. And I measured it against Connor Hellebuck and how many goals each goaltender saved versus expectations. So what you're doing is looking at every shot profile of every game that the goaltender faced, calculating what the likelihood of those goals were based on historical data, and then seeing what the goaltender actually gave up. And Hellebuck has outperformed both Carey Price and Jonathan Quick, whether you're looking at their first 425 games of their respective careers or whether you're sampling to the peaks of their career and picking the same 425 game window. The point being, if Hellebuck is already outperforming to date goaltenders like Carey Price and Jonathan Quick, who, maybe the tail end of their career is not what we remember them to be as real goaltenders. I start scratching my head a little bit about which goaltender actually did it better for longer. Now, again, I mentioned Lundqvist. That's probably the one. Maybe you start looking at Andrei Vasilevsky, but I honestly think that Connor Hellebuck, despite not having the hardware, the team-level hardware, I think you can make an argument he's the second best goalie of the last 20 years. And if you're uncomfortable with that because Vasilevsky has the hardware, fine. But if you put him in the 3 spot, I just don't think nationally across North America, everyone knows Hellebuck's a very good goaltender. But when you start framing it like, do you realize how good this guy has been for this long? And he just does it every night. And the team he plays for has, by and large, not helped him in any capacity, but the team has stayed afloat in large part because of him. Who else does that sound like? That sounds like Henrik Lundqvist. That's verbatim Henrik Lundqvist's resume. So I think the Jets fans know this very well. Maybe not as how impactful and how significant it's been, but across North America, I think Hellebuck has become one of the most underappreciated goalies. Everyone recognizes he's one of the better goalies in the league, but I think if you were to draw a list of the best goaltenders in the last 20 years, he's 2 or 3, and that to me is something that is not talked about enough.
Well, and it's funny, and it brings us to the future for Hellebuck and the Winnipeg Jets, and that we've kind of said he's their best player, their most important player. If you're going to keep him around, it's probably looking like a Carey Price contract. He'll be 30 years old in May. He's got 1 more year on his deal. If you're Kevin Cheveldayoff and you look at the importance of this player to the team, but also, any sort of associated risks with signing a player long-term beyond 30, how would you be navigating this? Maybe starting as early as this summer, making a decision on a player with 1 year left on his deal.
Yeah, so a couple golden rules here. I generally, and if you follow these golden rules, you'll win more often than not. Don't pay long-term for goaltenders, number 1. Number 2, don't pay long-term for goaltenders that don't have a sustained sample of outperformance and have shown to be reliable, whether they're having a great year or an average year. Their floor risk is very low. The reason why I bring that up, last year there was a goaltender carousel. There is every couple of years. The one goaltender I would have bet on last year, similar age profile, similar production. I think he had 350 games or so maybe a little less than Hellebuck. But Darcy Kemper, year in and year out, ranged from good to very good. And so his weaker season, Darcy Kemper had a good year. His good season, but Darcy Kemper was fantastic. I think the bar you have to clear to sign a goaltender long-term with that mileage, with that number of games, 30 going on 30, the bar you have to clear are, number 1, are you an elite goaltender? Number 2, are you durable? Number 3, are you reliable? Reliable meaning I don't have concerns about downside risk that you're going to bomb out in a given season or half season. Hellebuck checks every single one of those boxes. So as someone who almost exclusively would say, find another path, because what you are going to allocate to this player, you are not going to get back in terms of returns and production, even if he's still very good. That's generally a golden rule for goaltenders, unless you can check all those boxes. I think Hellebuck does. I think Hellebuck is a no-brainer extend for Winnipeg. I think that's something you start working on now. And by the way, it is going to be expensive, and it should. I mean, Hellebuck has the argument that, again, name me another goaltender who would walk into free agency in the last 15 or so years that can make the same argument he has. I mean, his statistical profile is as good as anyone's. So Winnipeg is going to have to pay out the nose. I just don't think they have much of a choice. Could they move on and try and find a goaltender, cheaper and take that money and spend it on the blue line or round out their forward depth? Absolutely. I don't know if it's the right decision. And considering what he's meant for that franchise, what he's done for that franchise, to me, there's a business argument to keep him down.
Hey, Travis, this has been awesome. Just before we go, I want to bring it back to the trade deadline quickly. Just get your thoughts on what we've learned from the market, about the market right now, from the Bo Horvat trade, from the Ryan O'Reilly trade, as well as a strange one yesterday with the move that Ottawa made with the draft picks and Zaitsev to the Blackhawks.
I'm about to hit send on my article right now, writing about Nikita Zaitsev, and to be funny but also serious. There is a fascinating. Teams have realized that you can acquire bad contracts and make teams pay out the nose, and it can be a brilliant bit of business. But I think what GMs do, and I think humans do, I include myself and everyone else, we discount how long can be. And if you look at that Zaitsev deal, now I'm blowing up my whole article, but that's fine. If you look at that Zaitsev deal, Ottawa acquired Connor Brown, who was a very productive middle six forward at the time, basically to take on Zaitsev's contract, and gave up effectively nothing for him. And he played hundreds of games, and Ottawa went through a full cycle rebuild, and they were terrible with Zaitsev on the ice, only to land yesterday with the team with now just a year and a half remaining on his contract, having gotten nothing from him in terms of play over 200-plus games. They had to send multiple picks with Zaitsev to Chicago to clear that contract. And I think that if that's not resonating with some GMs around the league, I don't know what would. And what to me is the takeaway there is I think GMs and all of us, human nature, are very quick to discount term and maybe overly discount term. It can stick for a very long time and really create problems for your cap. I think more broadly on the trade deadline piece, I think the part Ryan O'Reilly, I think, was obviously the big name going up to Toronto. Has a multi-goal game. That's a big piece. I'm very interested by Toronto's kind of win-ish now move, because they have to get out of the first round this year or people are going to get fired. I think that's obvious. The other shoe to drop, and we talked about this earlier, but it's pretty rare to have a game changer moved at the trade deadline. I don't think Ryan O'Reilly's that. He's a very good player. He's not the player he was 5 years ago. Timo Meier is a game changer. And so I am fascinated to see what the haul San Jose picks up from him. And I still remain fascinated also in San Jose by what's going to happen with Erik Karlsson, because Erik Karlsson looks fantastic. He is having a Norris caliber season. I think he fits in again, to our point about talking about Winnipeg, where everything seems negative, but you look around the league in the Western Conference specifically, and you're like, well, all these teams have warts. I really, really, really am struggling to think of a good reason why Edmonton should not make a move for Erik Karlsson. They bring Erik Karlsson into that lineup, and they make the cap work, and they're going to have to clear, I think, $4 to $5 million in space, and probably have to move some salary in part of that deal. But if they can get Erik Karlsson in that lineup, I think Edmonton's the favorite coming out of the West. So even though a lot of these teams are challenged right now, one move can really differentiate them, because if nothing else, you've got two players on the trade block in San Jose that are game-changing players. And game changers, we're talking about the top 15, 20 players in the league, of which I think both of them are still. So that to me is where all my eyes and attention, for the most part, will be on San Jose and what teams do business with them and what that call is going to be. San Jose could set themselves up for one hell of a quick rebuild if they go that route. We'll see what they do with Karlsson, but it seems like Meier will be moved.
Travis, this has been such a great conversation. Really looking forward to that piece you're dropping to TSN.ca shortly, and 8 days till the deadline. It is going to be fascinating one way or the other. Thanks so much for doing this. Be well.
All right. Take care, man.
All right, man. What a great segment with Travis Yost. Always enjoy talking to him. And hey, I've been telling y'all all year long, Hellebuck's next deal is like a Carey Price deal, folks. Guys certainly earned it. Whether it will be in Winnipeg or elsewhere, I guess we will find out. But the numbers and the performance speak for itself. All right, hey, got to give a big thanks to our friends at Little Brown Jug for their great support of WST. Locked and loaded for event 2 of the Winnipeg Sports Talk Sports Trivia Night down at Little Brown Jug, March 29th, everyone. Save the date. Looking forward to it. Already curating another amazing night of questions, good times, and delicious beers at Little Brown Jug. Should have ticket information for you next week, but mark that down. If you missed the first one, we had a hell of a great time. Hopefully everyone that was there at the first one will be back, and I'm really looking forward to it as well. So March 29th, down at Little Brown Jug, but you certainly don't have to wait till the 29th to head down to Little Brown Jug, try all those great beers at the brewery and tap room. And hey, if you're out at fine restaurants and bars throughout the city, the good ones will have 1919 on tap. You can also get the great taste of Little Brown Jug, 1919, the new Good Times variety pack at Manitoba Liquor Marts or anywhere that sells great beer. And a big shout out to Nick and Nikki DQ. It's pretty cold outside. Might be a great day for a hot flamethrower burger. One of the 6 new stack burgers at your local Nick and Nikki DQ. 4 locations: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's. And of course, if you're thinking about a blizzard or ice cream cake for a party or an event coming up, hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba for the quick and easy pickup once they get that sucker custom made for you, as only Nick and Nikki can. All right, let's get Remis back in here. It was a bit of a long one. We got to get to Coolbet lines and a couple other things, but what a great chat with Travis Yost. I always enjoy his perspective, sort of from outside of the market on the league, what's happening. And we have seen, the East and West right now is so different. The charts that he has showing, for instance, the Central Division's success against the Pacific, the Central, and the East speaks for themselves. And unfortunately, we've got a bit of an example of that on this last road trip for the Winnipeg Jets, Reem.
Yeah, big fan of that conversation. So there was a lots to take away. Dumping all over the playoff format, I'm here for any day. But the stuff he said about Hellebuck, maybe we don't really appreciate him, but him being the best goalie in the last 20 years or among the best, which is why, even if he called the Jets an average team, we know what they need, and they're in an average conference, so it's there for the taking. When you have the top goalie, I think you got a pretty good chance. Look, they're leading. Believe it or not, we can be all doom and gloom with the Jets' recent record. They're still leading the conference in wins. Hustler, they're firmly in a playoff spot. Like would you know based on this chat today that the Jets are leading the conference in wins?
No, you would know. That is a good point.
So they're 35.
Hey, huge game tomorrow. We get fired up. Avalanche in town. Ken Weeb's going to join us somewhere in between Newark, Phoenix, and Winnipeg. But hey, I just want to quickly get to the chat coming back here. MBHA Ball Hockey says, where is this? We've got a number of quotes on this on the Hellebuck conversation. Pay Helly, but 8 is too much. 8 is too much for Connor Hellebuck? Guys, if I'm Hellebuck's agent and they said, here's the offer, and it's 8 a year, I turn around, say, thank you. It's been nice doing business with you. We'll see you later. That's almost insulting based on what he's done so far. And T. Will says, we can't afford Helly. If we pay Helly $10 million per, we'll be the non-playoff team with the best goaltending team in the league. This team's got $10 million in cap space right now. What are you talking about? I would suggest we can't afford not to pay Connor Hellebuck. To me, I don't know. Where are you on that, Remis?
After, I'm pretty torn because I agree. He's over, he's going to be 30, and you don't want to give these 30-year-old players 8-year deals, but maybe he would be the exception. And I mean, where would they be without him? Maybe they're it's a situation where they're pretty much forced into it. They don't have a goalie waiting in the wings for them. I think you kind of got to give him the $10 million, but
Connor Hellebuck makes your team competitive with all of the other things that could happen with this team of players leaving and reset, bringing in younger players. It is a night and day different story if Connor Hellebuck's not in the mix. Now, I mean, I guess if you did trade him at some point, you're still getting some serious assets coming back. But listen, maybe I'm just a big Hellebuck guy more than some of you guys. He's been so important to this team. He's the best player on the squad, and he certainly earned every cent of the next contract that he's going to get. And it'll be fascinating to see how that all plays out in the meantime. Hey, before we get to the Coolbet lines, went out last night with a bunch of fellas to watch the game. And obviously we had the Jets game on most of the TVs, but we did have one of the tubes on TSN.3 and got a chance to witness the completion of Canada's epic reverse sweep in the rivalry series, Canada versus USA in women's hockey, one of the truly great rivalries in all of sports. And Remo, I'm not sure if some people maybe weren't paying attention to this, and we probably should have spent a little bit more time talking about it, but when the USA was up 3-0 in the series, it didn't really seem like a fun topic to touch. But how about that? Down 3-0 in the series, Canada comes back with 4 wins in a row. Marie-Philippe Poulin, the Canadian Athlete of the Year for 2022, starring once again. And it was really, really fun to watch last night. Canada all over them. The U.S. goaltending was a disaster. I think Canada was up 5-0 after their first 11 or 12 shots. And once again, that amazing rivalry continues to produce amazing drama. It's full 7 games. Great crowd last night in Laval, Quebec. And the red and white prevail. Big day for Hockey Canada, and they haven't had a lot of great ones over the last couple of years. Once again, it's the women providing it.
Yeah, pretty awesome. They said they could schedule this 7-game series that we've been asking for, and it seems every time they're in these championship games, it's a classic every time, and usually involves Marie-Philippe Poulin having big goals. So the reverse
did it again last night.
Yeah, the reverse sweep us. Wow, I mean that's tough for USA, who's been they've had their share of wins too over Canada. So nice that was getting some play on TSN there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And also in other news, Aaron Rodgers has left the Oregon facility of his darkness retreat. When do you think we'll get all the details of what was going on through Aaron's head? I guess it'll have to be the Pat McAfee show next week, Reem.
Yeah, we're hearing details about the room that he was in. I think it had a bed and a fridge.
A meditation mat.
Yeah, how we couldn't forget the meditation mat. So whatever he needed to do to go find himself on his darkness retreat. Good for him. We'll see where he ends up. Will it be the Jets, the Raiders? Who knows?
Packers.
The Packers.
Retiring.
Yeah, it could be a number of options. So I don't know. Do you want to spend a lot of time on, I guess, how do you know when he mentioned darkness retreat? You can't avoid it.
No, exactly. Yeah, but let's not waste time talking Aaron Rodgers when we've got a big Thursday nighter in the XFL tonight. St. Louis Battlehawks, Seattle Sea Dragons. Seattle, a -2.5 point favorite. Dusty and I had some fun with this tonight in the lock shop. I'm taking the home team, laying the 2.5 points on Seattle in the XFL. However, I know most of you, for hitting the Coolbet lines, are going to be thinking about these games this evening. Now, there is a brand new edition of the lock shop. Dusty and I both with picks for tonight's spread in the National Hockey League. Right now, if you're with us live, check the chat. I'm just throwing in the YouTube channel link for the lock shop. Make sure you go there and subscribe. One of our first 1,000 subscribers is going to win $1,000 cold hard cash. Right now we're pushing 600. So if you haven't gotten in there, check it out, and check out today's episode with all of our picks for tonight's action in the NHL. Here are the games. Minnesota -178 road favorites against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Rangers and Red Wings at the at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Rangers minus 144 faves. Devils minus 144 favorites at home against the LA Kings. Pick'em between the Oilers and Penguins in Pittsburgh, minus 108 on each side. The Lightning minus 216 favorites against the Buffalo Sabres. Capitals, Ovi's back. They've lost 5 in a row, desperate for a win. Good thing they've got the Ducks, who've lost 6 in a row. Washington, a minus 341 favorite. St. Louis at home to Vancouver, minus 122, the Blues favorite. And the Calgary Flames, after that bizarre game last night against the Coyotes, back at it tonight against the Vegas Golden Knights, minus 136 for Vegas, plus 116 for Calgary, who made up a couple points on a number of teams, including the Winnipeg Jets last night, still sit in 9th place and need to make a move to get above that playoff line. Boston and Seattle take on the Kraken. Bruins, minus 172 favorites. Preds, a slight road favorite at minus 122 in San Jose to take on the Sharks. All of those other numbers available at Coolbet. We've also got a nice afternoon draw in the Scotties. Actually, odds for both this afternoon and tonight are up. Important games for Manitoba curling fans. Jen Jones, minus 370 favorites against New Brunswick. The wildcard Ackland team, they're a big favorite against Newfoundland and Labrador. The Walker rink, actually, against Newfoundland and Labrador, minus 385. Rachel Holman, minus 385 against the Scheidegger rink. You got Yukon and Northwest Territories later on tonight looking to run the table for a perfect round robin on their way to potentially making it 4 straight Scotties championships. Carey Anderson rink. You can't even bet on Canada, but you can bet on Nunavut at plus 5,000 to win. You want to hit the rock line, Carey, and the Anderson rink, minus 7.5 point favorites on the rock line. You got draw 17 and 18 specials as well. And right now, the outrights, Carey Anderson is now a minus 204 favorite to win the whole thing. Ontario, Rachel Holman plus 345. Northern Ontario plus 425. And Jen Jones in Manitoba at 7 to 1. All there for you over at Coolbet. Use the promo code WST if you haven't played there before for a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200. And for you lock shoppers that rode with us on our Honda Classic picks, Billy Horschel, 30 to 1, tied for the lead at the Honda Classic. He's 5 under. Dusty's number 1 pick, Sung J M, who was the favorite at 10 to 1, 3 under through 13 right now. And Canadian Nick Taylor, man, what a season he's having right now. He's 2 shots off the lead, 3 under 67 as well. What's on the docket for tonight there, Reem? Just watching some hockey, parenting, being a dad?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. But if I had something, folding my laundry and watching hockey, that's a favorite pastime of mine. I'm looking forward to the the Penguins-Oilers game, Crosby versus McDavid, right? Isn't that what it is?
For sure.
And some good late games, Kraken, Bruins, Flames. So there are some games on tonight. I did watch the new South Park yesterday, Huss. They started it. I got to finish it now. They did an episode making fun of Prince Harry and Meghan going on their worldwide privacy tour when he had the book out, asking for people to leave them alone. So I watched it. I got my wife to watch that one. See, we're having a great time watching PGA Tour, Full Swing, South Park. Great time. So that'll be in there. I'm not sure what else. I got a lot going on. I do want to add though. Hey, if you're in here, hit the thumbs up, hit the red subscribe button. Someone said the more thumbs ups we get, the bigger the trade Chevy will make. Someone said that in chat. Yeah. So if you want him to get Timo Meier,
thumbs up, folks. Hammer the thumbs up if you would be so kind. If you're watching on a phone or iPad, I think you just have to close the chat and then hit the thumbs up. But it really does help us spread the word of the channel. And obviously, it's been a great show today. Thanks to Dave Pagnotta for jumping on. Travis Yost as well. Always love chopping it up with Brandon Rewucki. And tomorrow will be a great show, Reem, because Ken is going to join us from somewhere, as I mentioned, in between Newark, Phoenix, and Winnipeg. Hopefully the guys will get back in time for the game tomorrow. And we're also going to be doing a segment. Haven't done a lot on university sports as of late, but man, Saturday night, if you're a basketball fan, playoffs, Investors Group Center, number 2 Bisons, number 3 Westman, or vice versa. The crosstown battle between Manitoba and Winnipeg going at it. And our pal Kirby Shep, head coach of the Manitoba Bisons, is going to jump on as well. We'll hit that, latest around the league, and of course we'll be getting ready for the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night. Cannot wait for the weekend and sure can't wait for that game. In the meantime, folks, have a great one. Yes, hit that thumbs up, hit the red subscribe button, tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk, and Remo will get a big one heading into a game day edition heading into the weekend tomorrow.
Yeah. We'll go over Frank Saravalli's new trade board. He just dropped
Expanded.
Expanded.
Bigger and better.
Yeah, we've joked about how big can it be. I think it started at 30 names. Then it went to 43 names. Frank Saravalli dropping it during the show. We'll go over to more. 50, the biggest trade board ever, 50 names. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. And I know we're wrapping up. We should mention the Winnipeg Nightlife Awards are back. We won last year, best podcast.
Oh, that's right. They've had to change the category after such a thorough win for WST last year.
Yeah, so we won. I have the trophy. I'll have to bring it out. But we won best podcast / radio show, I think. So now they've split
radio
us up.
station. We beat all the radio stations as well. Yeah. That's why that one was so sweet.
Oh, it was best station, right? Yeah, we beat all the stations. So now at WNLA.ca, you can vote for best radio / podcast host, and they've split us up. So we're going head to head. So Huss, look, I know it's like in an election. I think you're going to get all the votes. You're the name here. So
I don't know.
Don't vote for me. Vote for Hustler.
Well, I think that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to split the Winnipeg Sports Talk vote. So someone else will come in.
Here.
Anyways, that was a lot of
there
fun.
You are.
We beat every radio station last year thanks to all of your support. And that's nice. Well, I'll vote for you just to I'll return the
I just voted for you. Don't vote for me. Vote for yourself.
WNLA .ca. What a fun run that was last year, making it happen. All right, we got to get these pods up. Everyone have an awesome night. Stay warm. Couple more days of this deep freeze, but tomorrow we'll have a hot one downtown Winnipeg. Jets and the Colorado Avalanche will be all over it tomorrow. We'll see you then, 1 p.m. on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Have a great night.
Oh my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.